Okay, good evening to you all. Everybody ready? Thank you. So welcome to tonight's meeting of the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I just have a couple of things to say on here. The role of the Overview and Scrutiny is to provide independent, critical friend challenge and to work with the Council's executive and other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions based on the weight of evidence and not on party political grounds. Non-committee members and members of the public are welcome to attend the meeting or participate in the meeting virtually or in line with the Council's constitution. This meeting may be filmed for inclusion on the Council's website. Please note that other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of these images or recording is not under the Council's control. So if I may receive any apologies?
No apologies, Chair. I think we've got a full house.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of December 23. Anybody, any comments about the minutes? Are we all in favour of the minutes? Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, and a seconder. Those in favour of the minutes? Charles, thanks. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members? Thank you. Public question time. Are there any questions from the public?
No public questions and no member questions, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll go on to item 87, which is a review of the Council's housing companies to scrutinise a report on the future of council housing companies. So 87, page 11. So Stephen, I take it you will be presenting this. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much, Chris. I think I'm now becoming a rather regular feature of your meeting, for which apologies. I'm here really just to introduce this report. We've got a great array of officers here connected with Loddon Homes, who will be able to answer any questions that you might have of a technical nature. Many of you will remember Simon, who was with us as interim director of Place and Growth for some time. Since he's left the organisation, he's returned to us as the new managing director of Loddon Homes. And we've also got Kajal, who has been handling all of the finances, doing absolutely sterling work in putting them in order, and Karen, who is the operations chief of Loddon Homes. So we've got the experts in the room. I'm merely the amateur. But let me just, if I may, just say a few words about the report and the context of the report. I'll then hand over to Simon if he wants to add anything, and then we'll do our best to answer any questions you've got. In essence, this report was commissioned as a result of discussions between the political and corporate leadership of the council about the role and function of the council's wholly owned housing companies. The housing companies, when they initially were formed, had many advantages. Were able to deliver many advantages. They enabled us to secure funding that wasn't available to us through the HRA. They offered some protection against loss of properties through right to buy. And they provided some mechanism for being able to use cross-subsidisation with market sale houses, subsidising social rental and other forms of tenure. So when the companies were founded, I think they had some very successful first years where they delivered a lot of new houses. Recently, that has slowed down. The house delivery has slowed down. In part, I think that's because market conditions have changed, and a lot of affordable housing is secured through Section 106 agreements in market developments, and as market developments have slowed down, the pipeline of housing, affordable housing, has also slowed down. But there was also some evidence of some problems within the housing companies that we thought needed to be carefully considered. Some of those problems related to changes in political leadership, not necessarily connected with the change of political groups running the council, but simply a steady turnover of elected members, different elected members, serving as board members. And this seemed to create a lack of stability and a lack of confidence amongst other board members about the direction of travel of the companies. So we were wanting to consider a whole set of options about how we might move forward. And commissioning this report, the Altair report, was a way to help clarify thinking and give us some pointers to what would be the best ways to try and ensure that we were able to deliver more affordable housing in ways that were that complemented the HRA. The HRA, I'm sure all of you realise, it's the housing revenue account. It's the housing stock that the council itself owns and directly runs and manages. So I'm going to make the very radical assumption that you read the report, which could be a mistake, but I'm hoping it isn't. And so what I'm going to do is just, if I may, highlight what I see as its key recommendations, just explain what those are, and also how we have reacted to those recommendations. I think the main recommendation that I'd like to draw your attention to is a significant change in the governance arrangements. The recommendation here is that rather than elected members serving as board members, they should, the role of elected members in overseeing the company's operations should be through a shareholders committee, scrutiny committee, leaving operational decisions in the hands of professionals, people who are experts in the field and know what they're doing. Because with all due respect to elected members, we kind of come and we go. Different people start to acquire a degree of expertise and then find themselves moved off into different responsibilities. And there's a certain lack of consistency and sense of direction that, I'm afraid, inevitably creates. So the first recommendation to draw your attention to is a significant change in governance arrangements, with elected members no longer serving as board members, but acting as effectively a scrutiny committee, overseeing performance and setting general objectives. The second thing to note is that there are three options that were appraised and considered. The first was effectively to consolidate the companies and reorganize them in a way that would maximize their effectiveness. The second was to close down the companies and incorporate their housing stock into the HRA. And the third was to sell the companies onto some other concern. Now, the recommendation of the report is that we go down the route of option one, which is to consolidate the companies and differentiate more clearly their function from that of the HRA. Now, I openly confess that my initial starting point was to think that the option of incorporation within the HRA was one I favoured. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, it's clear that that option has significant disadvantages attached to it. And the first and most obvious one is that there are we would lose the ability to be able to bid for certain types of funding. We would be able to add some social rental properties, but there are certain types of property held by the companies which would not fit easily within the HRA. So, although it wasn't my initial preference, I believe now that the first option, the recommended option here, reorganising and restructuring the companies and trying to establish a clear demarcation in terms of function between the HRA and the companies, so the companies doing things the HRA can't do, is the best way forward. I think that's probably all I need to say. We have discussed this report. We've discussed it in Woking Borough Council Holdings Limited, the holding company for all of the housing companies. And I think we are all of the view that we will be seeking to adopt the recommendations. There are, besides the options, choosing between those three options, there are 17 separate recommendations, and we see no reason not to adopt those. They seem sensible and sane and helpful suggestions, so we're minded as things stand to adopt those. Simon, was there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just first of all to say thank you very much indeed for hosting us this evening. At short notice, we asked if we could come along and be on the agenda, having had the report approved through WBC Holdings and the board in September. I was conscious that we hadn't shared anything with elected members, and given the fact that the companies are 100% owned by the council, it was right and proper that we shared that with you at the earliest opportunity. So thank you for that. As Councillor Conway said, we brought basically the leadership team for you here this evening. There's 8 staff, 9 if you include me, with the company, and Karen, Kajal and myself are the 3 senior. Kajal being head of finance as a secondee from the council, and Karen having worked for the housing companies, as many of you will know, for quite a number of years. So what we've been doing since the report was commissioned is obviously assisting in the production of the report and the review rather. It's typical of a review of this kind in terms of the contents that you'll have read and so on. And really, when I analyse it as the MD, when we got to the end of it, such a lot of it was kind of what we were thinking and reaffirmed what we were thinking. So as the incoming and new MD for it, I felt that it was a very good reflection of kind of where we were as far as I knew it, as being the newbie, as it were. I've no history on this at all, so I've had to get up to speed over the last 6 to 8 months during my involvement, which started off as part-time because, as Councillor Conway said, I was transitioning from the interim director role and took on the role in a full-time, part-time capacity, if you like, in June. But we've been working on the options and the recommendations since then, in terms of lining the ducks up in a row to ensure that appropriate lead officers from both the council and the companies were focused on those recommendations, and that we've set time limits for them. They're not within the report itself because this was the final report, but in terms of an action plan, which is referred to within the pack as well, we're still refining that and ensuring that council officers and ourselves are working alongside each other. And just a word on that, in terms of one of the themes that kind of maybe comes through in the report, the working relationship between officers from the housing company and the council is as good as it has been, as I understand it. It's very much communication lines are open. There's a mutual understanding of one another's organisational needs. And from a housing company point of view, as MD, I'm very conscious of the fact that it is a company or set of companies which is owned by the council, and therefore we should be working hand in glove with what the council's priorities are. and we're moving the board and the non-executive directors of the boards to look at it in that way as well. That said, we will always look for opportunities, and born out of the original intentions for the companies some 10 years ago, if an opportunity arose that was to benefit both the council and the companies, then we would obviously look at that in business case terms and follow through with that. In terms of the options and the conclusions and the recommendations, we've got a priority against them. One of the most important thing is, and Graham Ebers and I talk regularly about the need for us to determine a pipeline, and that's really dependent on what the housing companies do as regards opportunities, but also what the council have got coming down the track. And as you probably are aware, there's an awful lot of attention being focused at the moment on adult and children's services accommodation, so that we avoid cost in some high cost settings that we have right across the borough, but also right across the country. And we're also conscious of the need to support our housing need colleagues within the housing world as well. So we're very much focused with those as our priorities, and perhaps some of the larger schemes that we've been involved in years gone by won't be the thing that we focus on initially, but forming that pipeline and that intention to support the council around its housing need is very much at the top of the agenda. So that's what we're forming. And then the second big piece of work linked through and threaded through the recommendations is to do a lot more work on the finances. Kajal and the team have done a fantastic job in sorting out the finances with council colleagues who work with Graham and for Graham. And that is on a much more even keel, what you would expect with housing companies. So repayment of debt, interest, etc., which hadn't happened previously. That's all now in flight. What it does leave us with in profit and loss terms is a challenge, as it is for the council with its revenue budget and its capital budget, of course. And we're working through that in terms of the background to all that. And certainly we'll need to come up with a new, if you like, cost base as far as the companies is concerned. And in determining that and in executing that, the recommendations around the structures of the company is still very relevant around the option one, and whether or not we need to rationalise to an extent. We're not proposing to do that immediately, but we'll do that in a measured and well thought out business case sense. So that's really, Chair, what I wanted to say. And obviously, you know, you having read it, you may well have questions which hopefully we'll be able to field. Thank you.
Sorry, gents. Anybody else wish to speak?
I think
turn your mic off. Thanks.
I think we're assuming that. Sorry, you want me to turn this off?
No. Yeah. So yeah, I'd just like to make a quick comment. So there's two things that come to my mind when we're reviewing this, and the first one is the residents. Which of these options leaves the residents in the best position? Security of tenure. I can see, yes, there are some options in there about the possibility that in certain solutions that they would have the right to buy, but will they want the right to buy if they've had a good relationship with the housing association? It will take that stock out of the mix, and then we would lose those facilities. Then the third item in there is the sell. You mentioned the debt that the indebtedness that there is in the facilities at the moment. Would those debts be completely covered by selling? What would it leave? Would it leave the council still with any assets, any financial benefit from selling? And my personal opinion is I don't think selling is actually going to do anybody any good. But that is something for us to discuss. It's just my view. There's going to be other questions on there. So what I would like to ask is, are there any definite concerns or comments that wish to be made? So Charles, you're first, please.
Excuse me. Thank you. I agree with Chris's comments that selling makes no sense to me. Yeah, a fire sale of assets was never a good idea. My question was more about the structures. I had 3 years being involved with Optalis when I had the adult health portfolio, and the structure when I first became involved with that. I have a lot of sympathy for the point about continual changes of political people. I could see that totally. But the structure of Optalis at the time just did not work. Too many boards, too many people pulling in different directions. I was on the management and oversight board, I think it was called. Graham, please correct me, because you're, I think, the only person here who was involved in that. There was an operational board led by a non-executive chairman who had completely different ideas, basically, than the actual officers here about what direction he wanted to go. We could never get him under control. And all the time you'd sit in this operational board, the chairman and the managing director would come along, present you with a load of corporate fluff, basically, pat you on the head and send you on your way. And I never felt, basically, as a councillor or even as the lead portfolio member, and I know the officer who was involved in it had immense frustration that he was responsible but had no control. So I'm very wary of, I mean, to be honest, Stephen, if I was leading the council, I'd be very wary about that. But I do support what's being presented in the report basically as the best way forward, because simpler structures, everything I've done in my career, simpler structures, lead to quicker, better decisions, more accountability, more control, and more direction in getting on with the aims of the company. So that definitely seems right to me.
Very much for that, Charles. In fact, it's worth saying, I think, even before this report, we'd worked out that we needed to simplify the structure of the companies, and we're moving towards a position where Loddon Homes and Berrybrook would effectively merge. We'd started setting up common purposes boards, which would enable the two to coordinate their activities much more thoroughly. But it makes sense for them effectively to merge, because they'll be delivering slightly different things, but they can together in one entity cover the whole range of social rental, specialist housing, affordable rents. And there is an opportunity, as there was right at the beginning of this process when the companies were first set up, to engage in some market sales, which will help subsidise some of these affordable tenures. And my preference, it may not be impractical, but my preference would be to focus the social rental on the HRA. I would like to grow the HRA if it were possible, because the HRA needs to grow a bit to be financially, in the long term, sustainable. Because the problem with the HRA is its income comes wholly from the rents, and its outgoings are on maintenance and repair of the stock. And it doesn't take a genius to realise as the stock gets older, its liability to repairs and maintenance grows. But unless you expand the stock, your income, although it'll rise with rent rises, your income is not rising at the same rate as the liability for repairs and maintenance. So trying to grow the HRA, so we bring in some new properties, which, if they're built well, will not actually increase our liability to repairs and maintenance, but will bring in rental income, is a way forward for the HRA. So my preference would be a clear demarcation. It may not be possible to make it as clear as I'd like it, but I think we do need to differentiate functions between the HRA and the housing companies. And the housing companies have a role to play in delivering specialist housing. We were talking, in fact, Simon and I were talking just before the meeting started about some plans to try and deliver some specialist housing that will help us with our needs in adult social care, which I think will be excellent. And it's the kind of thing that companies can do. But your point about streamlining, simplifying structures is one I completely accept. I also think nobody has expressed any preference for option 3. So that's off the table, I think, effectively from our point of view. And although option 2 was one I was really interested in at the beginning of the process, the disadvantages are considerable. And just to, if I may, touch upon a point you raised, Chris, on the right to buy. The right to buy is something that does affect HRA, HRA properties still have the right to buy to them attached to them, and we still lose HRA properties every year to the right to buy. And you can understand why people want to purchase a home they've lived in all their lives. It's a natural thing to want to do. But of course, it means that we quite often lose the best in the housing stock, the most well-maintained, and we're left with the older and less well-maintained stock. So that again is another reason for thinking we do need to try and expand the HRA. But that exposure to right to buy does not exist for housing companies. So the housing companies have the advantage that their stock is not subject to the right to buy.
Thank you, Stephen. Peter.
Yeah, I think my question is going to be related to Charles's, is about the structure of the management. So you first of all opened by saying you wouldn't be directors, but then you'd have an overview and scrutiny process. What would the checks and balances be within that to say, actually, no, you can't do that, or yes, you must do that? Because overview and scrutiny makes recommendations, doesn't make you can or cannot do that. So it's really just where are the checks and balances in the process?
It may be better, sorry, Pete, I should have turned that on. It may be better to envisage this not so much as a scrutiny function, but as a shareholder committee. And the function of the council would be to set the strategic direction of the company. You know, I mean, when the companies was first set up, I think there were two strategic objectives. One, deliver more affordable housing. Two, deliver an income stream to the council. And the income stream mainly came from the difference between the rates of interest the council had to pay on its loans from the Public Loans Works Board and what it then lent to the companies. So it made some money out of that. Now, over time, it wasn't clear what the balance between these two objectives was. Now, in my mind, there's no doubt that the balance should be delivering more affordable housing, and the income stream is secondary to that, not on a par with it or higher than it. I mean, Graham may take a slightly different view, I don't know, but that would be my take on this, and that's the strategic direction we gave to the companies right from the beginning. And I would hope that strategic direction will continue. But I think the shareholder committee would actually oversee what the companies were doing and would challenge and could require changes. It wouldn't be simply a scrutiny committee that makes recommendations. That's my understanding. Simon, and I
Thank you. If you would, I can see you've got some topic to add to this.
Yes, so within the report, there's not that much information about that the role of the shareholder committee, apart from the monitoring of the performance of the housing company and setting the strategic direction for it. And what's happening at the moment is that there is work going on with council colleagues to develop that and to bring that to scrutiny for you to have a look at how that will work before a decision is then made by the council, I believe, constitutionally, to establish that. So you will have visibility. I would think this committee would have visibility on what it's going to do, how it's going to do it, ahead of the decision by the executive and ultimately the council.
Thank you. I do have some other questions, but I'll let other people ask.
Norman, please.
Yeah, it's good to see in the report the acknowledgement of the successes of the companies over the years in delivering the affordable and specialist housing. I think it has worked. It's delivered, hundreds of dwellings, which is good news. It's also good to see the sort of recommendations. It'd be interesting to see how that new structure works. I'm not entirely convinced by it, but I think it was useful having members on the board, but you have to look at the balance of membership, I think, and the skills of the people on the board. Having pointed out the successes, I think there are a few sort of concerns for me in this report, and I just wanted to go through some of them just to get your views on them, see whether you think they the consultants have picked up the right sort of air about them, or what the reasons might be. So I think the first one really is coming through 322 on page 22. Just saying the initial strategy was clear, but recently the pipeline has diminished. A recurring theme throughout the discussions is fundamental to this review. In short, the companies do not appear to have a clear growth or investment strategy and lack a financial plan outside the current year. And then down below, it's sort of in 323, it's saying the precise reasons for the pipeline diminishing so quickly over a short period of time are difficult to ascertain. That gives some possible reasons. Just wonder if you could comment on that, on the pipeline and the sort of financial plan, please.
Yes, well, as I said at the outset, my history on the housing companies isn't vast as some, but from what I've researched and from what I understand, and my initial comment would be, we went through a significant period of change over the last few years, obviously, where interest rates, for example, have increased significantly. The 106 opportunities have diminished to an extent as well. And I think there's been some, shall we call it, turbulence with a small t within the companies itself. So I think I would put those three things as the major factors around why perhaps that strategic direction hasn't necessarily been as we would have liked. But as you can see from the report, there's clearly a mandate upon us to re-establish that, and that's what I was referring to earlier on, where we're working hand in glove with council officials and elected members on re-establishing that pipeline. And that pipeline may form itself in a different way to how it's done at the outset of the companies. And again, with the financial strategy, which we're obliged to do anyway as a registered provider, to prepare a 5 and preferably a 30-year financial plan for the companies as they shape up. So all that work now is getting underway. And if it hadn't been done, it certainly jolly well will be.
Okay, thanks. And it's, again, so it says 324 that the council, they got the sense the council didn't see the companies as being a central element of the strategic approach to housing. So I just wonder, again, that, and you gave some reasons, but I just wonder, is the land available? Are they, you know, the opportunities available? Needs that availability. All the structure in the world won't help if the basic opportunities are not there. Are there sufficient opportunities coming through?
Well, it's not necessarily about land availability, because it's fair to say that whilst we're doing checks on land availability, that has dried up to an extent, it has to be said. But certainly we're looking at buildings and property availability. And again, it's a bit of a change of emphasis, but there are opportunities. And as I said earlier on, if we're focused on what the council's priorities are, as well as what the company's priorities could be, then I think it's going to be a fairly positive outcome to deliver accommodation requirements, and whether that's acquisition of land and build on it, whether that's acquisition of existing buildings, for example, rather than acquisition of land and build on it, then we'll pursue those opportunities as they arise. So it's a slight change of emphasis, I would say, Councillor Orbanson.
Okay, thanks. So again, 359, it's sort of going on about the development objectives. So I guess there's new objectives coming through there by the sounds of things, the change of emphasis you're talking about. So another one that was just a bit, it sort of contradicted what you said in your introduction in 5.1.2, page 37. It's indicating that they felt there was something of a breakdown in trust and effective collaboration and communication between the councils and the companies. Do you feel that is correct, or where did that come from? I guess. What do you think?
I think it's this was a reflection on the situation that it's an historic situation. I think gradually. That kind of trust that seems to have been present right at the beginning of the process seems to have eroded. I suspect it's partly down to personalities involved. But certainly this was a theme that came through, I think, in discussions with the non-councillor directors. They felt quite strongly that the council wasn't supporting them as well as it should do. And that is one of the things I think we felt it was going to be necessary to rectify if we were going to make progress.
And sorry.
Only really, I suppose, to give some assurance. Charles articulated some of the challenges, personalities, positions, agendas, exactly. And we've had those challenges on housing and Optilis. I think the critical point in all of this, of course, you can have governance is really important, but relationships is absolutely fundamental. And it's those informal meetings that go on outside that do all the work together so that we can bring the collective view to the more formal meetings. And I can say right now is, in my view, the healthiest that it's been. So not just saying that because Simon's here, but our working relationship with Simon is really, really positive. He works really well, as obviously Kajel is part of the team, and obviously Karen as well. And that's vital. So we have operational meetings, we have strategic meetings, and I know that the understanding is that the company is there to deliver the council's objectives and not for any other grandiose ideas or things that are a little bit off our understood script. So I just want to assure you that any problems with trust and relationships that may have been reflected here in the past, that they're certainly not the case right now.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Thank you. And finally, for me, I think it was just something that was said about the income stream from the companies. And I think the writers of this report may have slightly got the wrong end of the stick as well. I mean, they're saying there haven't been any dividends paid. I mean, that has been quite a deliberate policy really over the years, because we'd have to pay tax on any money coming out of the companies in that way. So if there are other ways to make the money, as Stephen indicated, then that's clearly desirable. So I think just to point out maybe to one or two of the newer members that that is the case. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, Norman, and I think it's unusual for these housing companies to pay dividends for exactly the purpose. For exactly the reason you just stated, and usually the income stream provided by those other means I mentioned.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, but they're quick, I promise. So the first one about councillors on board. I don't have a strong view either way on this, but would this make us an outlier compared to other councils, housing companies, boards, or is it considered best practice not to have councillors on them?
In my experience, it's always been a mix. In some instances, councillors remain board members, but I would point to election arrangements which actually probably play a factor in that. So if you are, as Wokingham is set up to have elections every year bar one, should we say, that churn can be quite frequent, etc. And you might get great stability with 4 yearly arrangements. I say my experience, not making any points as to a preference in that. I want to make clear. The other point I would say is that I think it was mentioned, the expertise is quite important, particularly in an area like housing, I would suggest. And if you have the right people who are being overseen by that shareholder committee, it can be very, very effective. You've still got the control as far as the council's concerned within that shareholding committee, because you're setting the strategic direction and overseeing the performance. And really effectively what Holdco currently sees, which is effectively what the board see, the shareholder committee would see. Okay.
Sorry, I'll say More briefly, yes, it is perceived best practice that politicians are not on the boards.
An officer would say that, Graham.
I would say it too. Having served on the boards, I really do not think that it's appropriate for councillors to be on there. You can have a level of expertise, but it's not going to be as great as the housing experts that are there. And if we want the housing companies to function fully and to deliver the benefits that they can deliver, then we have to be prepared to allow the professionals to try and run the companies with our overseeing them rather than being involved in day-to-day decision making. That's my view, certainly.
Thank you. I had to ask the question. And then secondly, when will a decision be made in light of the recommendations in the paper?
Still got to work through the details of quite a few of these things. I mentioned earlier on how we decide on the split between what the HRA does and what the housing companies do. That's still to be finalised. There are quite a few of these recommendations that are going to require quite a lot of work to implement. So we're not quite there yet, I don't think.
So in a few months, just sort of rough time scale, just because as soon as the decision is made, the quicker we can get with what the plan will be.
For example, the shareholding committee notion, I would suggest that will be finding its way to yourselves ahead of the new municipal year, for example.
Okay.
But I wasn't being flippant when I said 2024, because I think that most of this is achievable in the next 6 to 12 months in terms of those 17 recommendations. And any adjustments that we wanted to make to the company structures as well. Whilst those things do take time, we would put them into flight if that was the way that we felt it was right to go.
I think we were envisaging. I think we were envisaging the end of elected member board members from the start of the new municipal year.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, Simon, I know you spoke about the pipeline and focusing on helping out on children's services. And I know Councillor Prue-Bray's talked about children being put in very expensive care out of borough and wanting to bring that in the borough, which I completely support. And I know can't say for certain, but is the vision for that building bespoke homes for these children, or is it adapting semi-detached houses for them?
Combination of the two, isn't it?
I couldn't comment on the strategy around new build, etc. What we've been commissioned to do at the moment is to actually find existing accommodation that would be suitable for care leavers, for unaccompanied asylum seekers, for example. And that's what we're focused on at the moment. What we're trying to do, though, in developing that pipeline is to look a little bit broader than that. And that's where the commissioning discussions come in, and with the colleagues from Adult and Children's Services. But I think, likely a mix in due course once we stabilise and know exactly where we are financially and where we are with that budding pipeline.
I think that's right. The priority, and it is at such an urgent priority, is to get that accommodation so that we can control the children's and adult services budgets better. The priority is so urgent that new build is not going to actually answer in the short term. So we do need to acquire or repurpose what we already possess. That's some of it, repurposing what we already possess. But in the longer term, build is got to be part of the mix.
Thank you, Laura. Marie-Louise.
Thank you. Yeah, well, as you can imagine, my heart is with the second option, because a lot of these structures seem to be a very complicated way of getting out of building more council houses, which and I wanted to ask about the future proofing of this structure, because we are, although the Ming vase is only halfway across the room, we are looking at a change of government where there will hopefully be a much more positive attitude towards council councils providing their own housing. And, it's certainly something that we in Wokingham feel very strongly about because of the impact, the lack of that. And I was struck reading the report that there didn't seem, about the future proofing of this structure. How does it relate to, how will it, adapt to a new structure or a new situation where some of the funding streams, particularly, that always worries me when a structure is set up specifically because of existing funding streams, because they're volatile and, things can change, and then you have a structure that does not fit what is being asked of it. And for example, sort of like the establishment of local children's accommodation, is that not something that the council would have the expertise to do themselves? Why would there need to be? I'm not sure how. That's a new priority. I can absolutely see, and it's a really important priority. It's just, are we assigning that to a structure because we want that structure to have a function, or is there some specific expertise that the companies would have, or the company would have, that the council doesn't have? Sorry.
I'll start off answering this one if I may, and then Simon can add anything he thinks I may have missed. As I said in my introductory remarks, I'm very keen to grow the HRA. And if a new government is to make that easier, I'll be very happy. The HRA is as our social housing provider, and I would quite like the demarcation, as I said, between the housing companies, the HRA, to be clearer, so that the social housing function was delivered through the HRA. And that's old-fashioned council housing. So I don't see anything incompatible between what a future government may be planning in terms of making it easier to build more council houses or increase the size of HRA stocks, and having these companies that deal with other forms of tenure. As currently constructed, the HRA can't deal with some of these forms of tenure. It can't do some of these schemes, and those schemes have been the bread and butter of registered providers, particularly shared ownership schemes, but affordable rent schemes, which are higher cost rents than social rental schemes, and forms of specialist housing. The registered providers have been specialists in providing specialist housing, so they do have that expertise. The HRA is not really geared up for that. It's geared up really, as I said, it's a kind of ring fence fund for maintaining your housing stock, and where possible adding to it, and we are adding to it. The Gorse Ride Regeneration Scheme is within the HRA. It was initially put with Lawton, then it was decided it was better placed in the HRA, and that will add some additional housing to our HRA stock, as well as refurbishing and therefore reducing maintenance and repair costs in the future in the rest of it. So I think it is future-proofed in the sense that if a new government is to make it easier to build council houses, is to provide us with mechanisms by which we can expand our HRA, I'm quite sure I would welcome that very much.
Thank you. Pauline.
Thank you very much. There's two things worry me about this. The first thing is, I think you need to be an awful lot crisper about your control over the companies. You may well have this best will in the world that everything's fine and you're all friends and you're all pointing in the same direction. At some point you won't be. And at that point you need proper controls. Otherwise you will be in really big trouble. And with the companies with no politicians on them, and I don't particularly care whether you have politicians on the board or not, but if you don't know what's going on and you don't have control unless you're very clear about how you're going to create that control. The whole point of having politicians on there was to be able to understand what the housing companies are doing in some amount of detail and to have proper control. Now, if you're not going to be on there, that's fine, but you need to find another way of doing it. I think there's also a bit of a misunderstanding about boards of directors. I've been to many FTSE boards. you sit around a FTSE board, the people at the FTSE board do not have the expertise in the individual business that you're talking about. What they do is have individual expertise in running companies and expertise in representing shareholders. They don't know anything, in my example, they don't know anything about aircraft, they don't know anything about air transport, but they know a lot about the risk and they know a lot about how to run a company. And that's the thing you want. You don't want a whole load of people sitting around a company board who all know about housing but don't know about any of the other things. So that's my second warning. And the third thing was Berrybrook was set up specifically to allow it to be a registered provider. I think the vision was originally that it would start bidding to be a registered provider to do the 35% affordable that currently housing developers offset to other registered providers, because we figured we could probably do a better job of running those than the housing companies that the people housing companies use. So by merging Berrybrook and Loddon, I'm worried that you lose the opportunity to do that. And the less different forms of housing company you have, the more likely you are to not be able to access particular forms of funding in order to deliver the best result for the residents of the borough, which is what we want to do, I think, which is what we all want to do. So just be careful you don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater and make it a philosophical dislike of the particular structure that's there at the moment or the controls that are there at the moment, and end up losing control and losing opportunity by having things that are too merged together that therefore do not qualify or not having the right governance.
Well, I think you're right that, making sure that we've got robust arrangements for keeping control of the companies as the shareholder, the owner, is vital. But I think we can do that. I don't think it has to be done by elected members sitting on the boards. So far as Berrybrook's concerned, I think the analysis here suggests that some of the potential disadvantages of winding down Berrybrook and merging it with Loddon can be mitigated and are being mitigated. I don't know whether you want to say anything on that, Simon.
Well, again, it's rather similar to the governance arrangements in the sense that the council would have visibility about the proposal, and in the report it clearly sets out what could be some of the advantages and the disadvantages, but there's no move at this stage to do anything structurally because we are running in slightly uncertain times. I think the report does future-proof the situation around a potential change of government, and we would proceed at the point where we knew we had perhaps a little bit more certainty around that. But I don't think we would want to do anything that would jeopardise opportunity for the council.
Thank you. That's good news. Does that mean for the short term you're going to continue running Berrybrook separately from Loddon? Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yes.
And then the follow-on question would be, are you actually going to expand your opportunity as a registered provider and try running after more business that maybe would be available from developers rather than just building your own, essentially?
I missed part of that. Would you what?
Sorry. I think the original vision for Berrybrook, and I suppose no one can probably correct me if I'm wrong, was partly to be a registered provider so that we could then bid to the developers for the 35% affordable housing.
It is a registered provider.
Yeah.
Okay. But are we going to do that bidding?
Well, we do already.
Do we?
Yes, it's the short answer.
Can you give me some examples?
We in terms of funding opportunities, there's actually work going on at the moment through Loddon in terms of bidding to Homes England for grant.
I meant when some developer, I don't know, Bovis or somebody, get a license to build 300 houses somewhere, they have to provide a proportion of affordable. Are we bidding for those to provide that proportion or manage it?
Yeah, so we in the previous financial year, we successfully acquired Hatch Farm Dairies, which was a Section 106 development, which we delivered as supported housing for adults. We also did 3 different sites for shared ownership where we acquired through the Section 106. We are continuing to do that, but working on the financial viability of doing that. But it's certainly part of what we're looking at the moment, including considering bidding in the Parcel P sections up at the Arborfield site.
Thank you, that's great. So Hatch Farm Dairy's obviously had a lot more than supported living in it, and a lot more affordable housing. Are we going to? I think my question is, I think one of the worries you've always got about the housing companies is they're a bit too small. So, you know, are we going to try and grow them so that they can actually take on bigger parcels of affordable? Because I think, I think that's an opportunity where we could actually provide a really good service for our residents.
Graham wants to come in, but just before he does, I mean, that of course is part of the logic of eventual merger of Berrybrook and Loddon. They would be a bigger company, better able to compete.
Yes, Paul, I was going to pick up the point of making sure we don't lose the opportunities of any mergers. So Berrybrook was actually set up so that it could be unfettered in terms of its requirements under Homes England grants and all sorts, and was there to be able to embrace the private sector in a more aggressive way, let's say. So yes, for sure, if there's any merging of the structure in the way that we're exploring, we need to be clear what was the purpose of setting up separate. And there was a purpose, but are we losing that opportunity? So you're absolutely right, although I know you bashed them with the wrong company, but you're right. The two were set up for a reason, to be able to do slightly different things and have certain different flexibilities and permissions. So we do need to make sure that we don't tie ourselves up unnecessarily.
Yeah, that's right. But it is also fair to say the landscape's changed, and it's now possible to bid for things it wasn't possible to bid for when the companies were set up. So even the HRA can bid for things that it couldn't bid for before. So it's the changing landscape that at least partly is explaining changing approach.
Thank you. Charles.
Thank you. Personally, I'm really quite sceptical about this governance arrangement. I share many of the things Pauline said, but Scrutiny, you're meant to be a constructive friend, so that's what I'll try and be. And what I was going to say is I think you need to define much more clearly what the relationship between these boards is, how control is kept, who, for example, Simon reports into, how the strategy is set, how much reporting back there is financially, whether to the shareholder board you called it, and to the council on a wider level. As at the end of the day, this is taxpayers' money. And I, for one, basically, whether it was in opposition or basically at the time we were in control and I had responsibility for a portfolio, would absolutely be terrified of being the politician who'd agreed to something and then it all went badly wrong. And with the best organisations in the world, sometimes things go badly wrong. And I'm the one left carrying the can for it. And the taxpayer is the one banging on my door and the local papers, not the people who run the company. So that would be my kind of constructive comment on that.
As the executive member for affordable housing, I'm not the affordable member. I'm affordable. I'm very, very cheap, I can assure you. But as the executive member for affordable housing, of course, that's my door they'll be knocking on. But I would envisage whoever fulfills that role will play a key part in governance arrangements. But we do still have to finalise the details of the governance arrangements.
Peter.
Yeah. With regards to strategy, you said you're still formulating that and bringing that forward. Would that be coming forwards to the full council with regards to how you're going to set up the governance as well?
Yes.
That's an easy answer. Secondly, the other one, which is a favourite topic of mine, is management companies. So I didn't know whether that's within scope within the strategy that you would be bringing forward. When I say management companies, I mean management companies for blocks of flats, management companies for estates, because of the market is pretty atrocious at the moment for those.
We have had some preliminary discussions about whether one of the council's wholly owned companies could take on functions as a management company. And that's something we're exploring. I don't know whether it's going to be possible, but that certainly would be an interesting way forward.
And one question, I don't know whether it's out of scope or not. I was just looking at the accounts. Is that out of scope? So I do have one question, but you can say that's not in scope of this scrutiny.
We'll attempt to answer it.
Okay, it's just a.
Hide.
Through last year, oh, sorry. Shared ownership sales went through last year, higher number than the previous year. We also completed on Gorse Ride as well, Gorse Ride 1.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions or observations from the floor? You're winding up, Steve?
I need to say thank you. Those have been helpful comments, and we'll obviously take them away and actually reflect on how we can address them as we develop this pathway. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So as there are an awful lot of conclusions, options and recommendations to go through, and it's a lot of work that you're going to be doing in the meantime, when would you think you are in a position, 2-3 months time or less or wherever, that you would have some more information, some more meat to add to this?
Chair, as I sort of hinted at, I've wanted to come to a council scrutiny meeting for some time just to share the report. And with the way the relationship is now, I see no reason why you shouldn't have us as guests at your scrutiny meetings on a regular basis to be determined by yourselves. We would happily come along and share with you where we are. I think there's a number of things that need to come through to the committee as a matter of course, the structural issues about the strategy, the financial plan, etc. So we're probably going to be making several visits, should I say, over the year. But I think anything of a strategic nature that is the council's responsibility to agree to and set the direction for, we would need to come through that route.
Thank you for that. So what I would like to suggest then is that realistically it is in your hands, because you'll know how far and well you're getting on. If you could approach the Democratic Services when you do have something to offer, that we could include it into the schedule. I don't want to set you a set time scan because it's fluid in what you're trying to do. I don't want to put you under pressure to come up with an answer when there isn't one. So if you could, we'd be really grateful.
Will do. Thank you.
Peter, yeah.
Do we have to sort of make any written recommendations from what our discussion? So, for example, about the governance, we'd like to see some sort of detail in structure and detail with strategy formation, or do we just?
I think we could end up having double the time we spent already trying to figure out exactly what we want to do with that. I do think there's a lot to take on board and a lot to and I don't want to hamper you with recommendations that don't work.
Well, so, if I can just quickly come in on that. I mean, we have listened very carefully to what you've said, and I know Simon's been making copious notes. So if I can offer some assurance, we will be taking these things away, whether you were recommending we took them away or not, we'd be doing so.
I think that's as far as we could go, actually, is to please.
I could just ask Stephen, what do you see as the decision-making process now on this, taking it forward?
As the executive member, I've obviously got to be involved in this, but I've said at various stages in the municipal year, I'm very keen that backbench councillors of all parties play a role in helping to formulate policy. And obviously this committee is one of the examples of where that can happen. And you this evening have made some really helpful suggestions as to how we may move this forward. So I envisage taking on board the kind of things you've been saying, working further on this, coming back to you with a further iteration for you to have another look at, and for, again, more feedback coming through from you. Ultimately, I may be happy with it, but it's going to have to be approved by the full council.
Still leaves me with a thought. So Along those lines, it is going to be a case of we're going to have to wait for the minutes to come around to refresh everybody's mind as to what was said, because there's been a lot said and we haven't all got it noted down. So I would like us as a committee to wait until the minutes are available so we can reappraise, and at the next meeting that we are available, we take 10 minutes to review that. Is that okay with you, Pauline, please?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Stephen, if it would be helpful if you brought the draft shareholders agreement back before it was agreed, for us to have a look at. I mean, there's a lot of us have been on boards of council companies for quite a while.
I don't think there would be any problem with that at all. I think we were envisaging doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'd like to offer our thanks from the committee for coming forward this evening. It's been really not entertaining, but enlightening. Enlightening. And look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Maybe I should just say, as the officers are leaving, they have done extremely well. A lot of really hard work, particularly because I'll get the accounts in a good order, and really, I think they deserve everyone's thanks for the work they've put in.
Stephen,
they've already gone, so they didn't hear me say.
But it will be. We'll make sure that it's reflected in the minutes that they do have our grateful thanks for the effort they put in. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 88. So, Narendra, are you presenting this or? Sorry? David. I know David's in the corner. I know he's definitely going to be saying his piece. I wasn't sure who's going to be the spokesperson to start the topic off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is the Borg strategy update, and especially looking at the action plan that we have for Borg. It has been 4 months since it was approved at executive, but in that time, the action plan was approved as well, the Community Safety Partnership, only in December, and we've certainly gone on and has joined White Ribbon as well. So people have been active. There's no set person who's in charge of this. It's people do it as and when they have time. So it's quite important to remember that. Something that I'm very hot on, and something that you asked for last time this was here, was about co-production and talking to people who've gone through abuse and so on, talking to women and girls who've been through abuse. And that's why we've only got 1 year for the action plan. It's a 3-year action plan, but we've only done 1 year because as we talk to people who've been through abuse, as we find out what they're saying, it will change, it will evolve, because that's what's important. It's, we don't want this to be set in stone for the next 3 years. We want it to be a moving thing, so that it is appropriate to the needs of the people we're working with. And the needs of the people we work with might be different in a year's time, in 2 years' time. It might be a different cohort of people who have different ideas and different needs who we're talking to. So we need to make sure that it's as fluid as possible, so we make sure so we can go on developing it and evolving it. The other thing I was going to say is the progress in the action plan. It doesn't look as if there's been much at all, but I think Narendra will show you that there has been quite a lot. Certainly she's got quite a lot in her. She's written down of what's happened, and yes, it does look fairly bare, but it isn't bare. Things have happened, things have gone on, and things are in the pipeline to go on in the next 2 or 3 months. So it is something which is moving forward. You want to say anything?
No, that's okay. Thank you. I think in terms of the report, it's also very important to remember that whilst we have a violence against women and girls strategy, the read across for this strategy in terms of the community safety partnership work is very integrated and it as a strategy, it cuts across many different areas of the community safety partnerships work. So whilst it talks about violence against women and girls, that work is cutting across keeping our residents in Wokingham safe in terms of reducing crime and disorder. It makes recommendations and improvements for situational crime improvements that will benefit not only women and girls, but it will also benefit wider community and everybody who either visits, lives or works in Wokingham. So the 6 priorities set out in the paper look and are very much focused on victims and survivors in year 1 as a development objective for year 1 of the action plan, but as a wider approach to increasing safety in Wokingham. This cuts across, as I said, in many different forms and shows up as work across many different themes of the Community Safety Partnership. I'm happy to take questions in lots of detail, but I think if I just take the committee through the action plan, which is attached in terms of just to provide a brief overview in terms of some of the progress being made on the priorities. I'd like to probably just highlight that in terms of doing the analytical work around some of the data that we have currently as a preemptive piece of work to at a very fundamental and basic level to try and understand currently what our position is across the borough in terms of the information. That is work that is currently underway. So that is work that we do on an annual basis. It is work that we do on a quarterly basis, and it's work that we do on a monthly basis to ensure that we understand the crime and incidents that are being reported to the partnership in respect of broader understanding of crime and disorder issues. So work to understand a very basic base level before we go and talk to victims and survivors is currently underway. We've got some very comprehensive data across 5 years, 10 years and 15 years to tell us what and beyond in terms of the crime and disorder picture across the borough, and information that victims and survivors tell us will be overlaid with what is essentially very one-dimensional crime incident data, but as we have said, and this committee has also recognised on a number of different occasions, that's not the full picture. And this action plan for year 1 seeks to understand the full picture, not of victims and survivors that we know exist in the system, but also of victim survivors that, for whatever reason, a plethora of reasons, feel like they are unable to come forward, unable to seek help. And we want to understand and learn from those very hard to reach individuals as well. In terms of priority 1, like I said, a large amount of the data analysis, which is captured as part of actions 1.1 through to 1.3 is already underway. In terms of actions 1 to 1.4 through to 1.7, still on page 50 of the report, the timeline in respect of that chunk of actions is the end of summer 24. And the progress we are making is also, like I said, threaded through some of the domestic abuse work that we're doing with the Domestic Abuse Networking Group. So that's what DANG stands for on the action plan there. And also in terms of some of the work that we're doing in terms of reducing crime and disorder and reducing the likelihood of there being victims across the borough for things such as street lighting, parks and open spaces and green spaces, work in car parks to reduce the likelihood of those car parks being subject to antisocial behaviour. But that work will obviously have a knock-on effect for this action and action plan and strategy as well. If I take you through to priority 2, there are large amounts of work in the progress columns as the committee can see, and I'm happy to take any questions on those. But really, for priority 2, we can see that there's a large amount of cross-cutting work and collaborative approach with lots of stakeholders, including health and our criminal justice partners to be feeding into that, as well as larger government departments and a footprint that works across the Thames Valley and also in the southeast, with lots of different charities and organisations working at a regional level as well as the Thames Valley and a local level. So really, in terms of collaboration, we seek to do that at its widest possible scope. Priority 3, we have got a clear focus in terms of perpetrators and holding them to account currently as part of our domestic abuse strategy. So this is work again with a cross-cutting theme, but also that's been recognised in terms of implementing work across the Thames Valley with the Police and Crime Commissioner, and we now have a strategy and also a programme which is being delivered in partnership with probation colleagues and also with the Police and Crime Commissioner's office in terms of developing a Thames Valley-wide perpetrator programme, which will have a beneficial effect on currently some of the perpetrator programmes that we have through our commissioned service with Cranston, who deliver our domestic abuse programme. In terms of priority 4 very much feeds into the work that we are very focused on for this year, which is around understanding that victim voice through all of the work that we want to undertake in terms of delivering the strategy. And so that feeds into and across all of the different actions in the action plan. What we haven't done currently is RAG rate. So where committee members would like to see a sort of RAG rating across the action plan. We are, of course, waiting to weave in some of the comments from yourselves today and any other final comments that other stakeholders may wish to just give us before we sign off for this quarter the action plan. But I think the important thing to remember is that this is a live document even for year 1, and any changes can be developed and woven into the action plan as we go on, and as we might discover that we've been we may have left some actions out for the action plan currently. So that's with that, I'm happy to take any actions, any questions around any of the actions that are in the action plan, or any wider comments that the committee would like to provide.
Laura, please.
Thank you, Narendra and David. I've got 2 questions on the action plan and 1 on the anti-abuse charter. I asked Councillor Sarah Kerr this question in September 2022, which is a while ago. So I went back to the minutes to remember what she said. And she said, the action plan will include smart outcomes based on measures of success formulated from local discussions with local victims. And I don't see that in this action plan at all. I don't see timelines. I don't see a lot of specifics. I don't see measurement. And I know measurement was a big theme last time this came to the ONS committee. And I don't see a lot of change here. So am I missing where these smart outcomes are? And then I'm quite surprised, such as priority 6, especially on schools, there's no looking at surveying schoolgirls now and then at the end of year 1 and then the end of year 2 and 3, because at the moment this action plan doesn't show how are you going to measure how this is decreasing violence against women and girls over the years, because it's all well and good delivering these things, but that's not actually the progress we're looking for. It's the outcomes. And I can't see that here, also with charities and the police as well. So it'd be good to know where those smart outcomes are and how we're actually going to know at the end of the strategy, yeah, we've definitely measured it's on the downward loop.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. What I would say in terms of the priorities and the action plans within the action plan is that there are some of these actions, such as the one that you've just suggested there in respect to doing that very detailed granular work as to whether, for example, any of the school work that we may put in through PSHE, whether they've had the desired outcome that we've wished to achieve, will have some very detailed, granular measurements underneath some of these actions coming out that will be reported in to the progress columns as we go along. So whilst they're not very detailed and specific at this stage, they will, when updates are provided as to whether progress is red, amber, green, as to why they are considered to be red, amber, green, and the progress that we're making, such as the numbers of cohorts of children for the action, for the example that you've just given, the numbers of children that have been actually on a programme or received some information, not just the numbers, but also, as you've just outlined there, their understanding at the beginning of that programme and then their understanding afterwards, and whether they feel they've actually had some actual significant improvements in their understanding, will be fed in as percentage and actual number terms into the progress column as we go along.
So why is it not in
Can
here?
I just say, I think, if you look at 6.5 about working with local communities and stakeholders to understand about abuse, and that isn't a one-off thing, that's a continue, we will continue to do that. And so that can become a measure of how effective we're being in making sure that we're supporting survivors and they're addressing the permissive cultural norms that are so prevalent. So it's things like that we're trying to make sure we're counting in that way.
Just to add, in terms of these, where, for example, some of these actions where we are talking about, the lead being the DANGs, such as, for example, the Domestic Abuse Networking Group, very, very comprehensive plans exist within these groups that detail out some of this work and how it's going to be carried out through the actions, wider actions in those groups. So this is very much a headline action plan in some respects that has very detailed granular action plans that sit underneath almost each one of the actions that are detailed here. So hopefully that's a little bit clearer.
Why don't we have the detailed action plan here? Because that would make it really useful, because at the moment I'm guessing and I don't see the timelines, I don't see the measurements, I can't see how this is actually going to help women and girls long term. But I know that you assure me they exist. And we did ask for it last time and it's not here. We're kind of going on a wing and a prayer that it's there. But if it's written down, why do we not have it here with us? Why can we not scrutinise it now?
I think what I can do is provide the detailed action plans to the committee, but they will be there will be a number of different action plans that will be attached. So I'm happy to provide, for example, the Domestic Abuse Networking Group Action Plan, the Community Safety Partnership Action Plan, the Partnership Domestic Abuse Partnership Board Action Plan, all of which have very detailed work underneath them that will be delivering all of the work set out in this action plan.
And that's got measurements of timelines and,
yes,
and what it's going to have.
Yeah.
Because we asked for this last time, but we didn't get it. And Councillor Carr told me a year and a half ago there'd be smart outcomes in this, and there aren't. So I'm really struggling. Why is it not here? Why are the measurements not here? And we raised this in the ONS last time as well.
I think what we could do is take the committee's comments away and provide some, we could add some smart timelines within this action plan that outline the actions that we hope that we're looking to take that incorporate the actions from the other action plan. So I absolutely appreciate the comments that you've made in terms of adding and overlaying some smart action points within this action plan to make the timelines clearer. So I'm happy to take that away and do a revised version with smart timelines.
Thank you, Narinda. And when can we have that? Because obviously I asked for the smart outcomes a year and a half ago, and we asked for the measurement last time at ONS. So do you have a timeline for us, a month that we can actually get this? Because I realise this action plan's been worked on for well over a year and a half now, and there's very little detail in it, and no next to no measurement at all.
Just to clarify, the action plan hasn't been worked on for a year and a half. The action plan's only been worked on since it was approved, since after the strategy was approved in September. So the action plan's only been existent for a matter of months. But I do appreciate that the smart timelines underneath, in some cases, have been around for some period of time. So we can add that in. In terms of timelines, I will have to come back to you because as Councillor Hare did say, this work on the violence against women and girls agenda does feature in a work plan that cuts across many other different priorities. So we will, I will come back with a timeline in terms of when we can provide that.
And when will that be, Narinder?
I can come back but by the end of the week in terms of the timelines for a revised plan to be circulated.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, do we gather best practice from neighbouring authorities? Because I've been really impressed with Reading Borough Council, what they've done in the last 6 months to a year. With government Safer Streets funding, they've got CCTV and lights within the town centre more. It certainly makes me feel a lot safer. They've worked with Reading University students, the girls there, to launch an app to help guide them home from nights out so they can update it in real time whenever there's intimidating behaviour. They've launched a Reading Safe Space. They also had Violence Against Women and Girls Conference in November, which brought about best practice. So they've really cracked on and they've made a difference to women and girls' lives. And they don't have a violence against women and girls strategy. They don't have white ribbon accreditation. They've just delivered it. And they've listened to women and girls in that way too. So have we tried to get some government Safer Streets funding? Have we worked with the Police and Crime Commissioner on this? Because I know in here it talks about looking at assets of the council's car parks. And I can think of a load of places I'd love to have CCTV and lighting. And I just worry that the strategy's taken well over a year and a half, whereas Reading Borough Council's next door to us, they've cracked on and they've made life so much better for women and girls. And I just worry that we're really just delaying things a lot more. So I wondered if we've looked at the Safer Streets funding and when we can hopefully talk to women and girls about how we can make our assets, our car parks safer.
So in terms of Reading, I can inform you that sadly, the Safer Streets funding, we didn't qualify as a local authority because we had actually previously qualified for the previous Safer Streets funding for antisocial behaviour. So we managed to gain some antisocial behaviour funding for Safer Streets, which was Safer Streets 1. So that took us out of the running for Safer Streets 2, which was around violence against women and girls, which was supported by the PCC's office. So we were out of the criteria for that, sadly. What I can also say was the actual criteria for Safer Streets funding, both antisocial behaviour and for VORG, in terms of where we sit with the number of crimes and also the numbers of incidents, we as a borough don't we don't qualify because of the number of different we don't qualify also because our recorded incidents and crimes are quite low. So Reading is, you won't be surprised to hear, very different in its demographics, together with a number of different other boroughs across the Thames Valley, all of which have quite high prevalence of incidents of crime and disorder, including reported incidents of violence against women and girls because of their extensive nighttime economy and lots of other different reasons that Reading is absolutely not comparable to Wokingham. So they were able to attract funding around violence against women and girls. And I think one of the challenges that we have as a local authority and a borough is really trying to understand some of those lived experiences of individuals and why the prevalence is so low in Wokingham. Really, why do some of our victims not feel able to come forward? We've done some really, really good work in the domestic abuse arena. We've been recognised nationally for our work in the domestic abuse arena, which very closely aligns with the violence against women and girls agenda, albeit is one strand and one pillar of the violence against women and girls agenda. So we have been doing lots of work on a national and on a regional basis to try and get funding where it is available and where Wokingham qualifies because of its demographics and low, absolutely very, very low crime prevalence. But where we're able to, we are still continuing to look for those opportunities.
Thank you. I remember council meetings where we were being told by members around this room that violence against women and girls in our borough was endemic, and now we're being told that actually we've got very low levels of it. So I think that's very telling, but there we go. I've got a question about the anti-abuse charter. So I know we voted for it to go to the Community Safety Partnership annual update. And I know that I fed back last time that I wanted to make sure that there are measurements associated with that and it's not going to be forgotten about. So can you assure me that there will be a specific few paragraphs in the anti-abuse charter as to where we've got to, how we're making sure that the culture of it is being embedded across the departments, if we're going to have champions of it within the departments, and how it's going to be measured?
Yeah, so I can reassure you that when we come back in July in terms of the wider report that we'll be incorporating the work on anti-abuse, those comments that you've made and been quite clear about will be incorporated into the report. What I can also say about the anti-abuse charter is that it's work also that spans across several different work areas. So we are doing lots of work, as you won't be surprised to hear, in this recent very turbulent climate on hate crime and the prevalence of hate crime locally, trying to monitor it, doing our best to ensure that communities have a voice and the ability to be heard. So that's sort of one strand of work that we've been working on very recently. The other thing I would suggest about the anti-abuse charter is that we have been also busy implementing, since we received white ribbon accreditation in November, a workplace policy and a number of different other aspects around the white ribbon work that we've been doing in terms of implementing champions and various other pieces of work that we've had to do and had to be approved for receiving white ribbon accreditation. So happy to bring back obviously the detail that you've asked for in respect of that. But again, really recognising that anti-abuse does then cut across several different elements of the Community Safety Partnership as well.
Just a bit worried that's going to be forgotten, but can you assure me that no, we'll get an update, we'll get those measurements, it'll be similar to what I asked for before, we're going to have those measurements, we're going to have it all together so we can actually have complete cut through of everything, and we understand how this is actually going to change the lives of women and girls in our borough. I know that we've apparently got very low levels, so much so that we don't even qualify for funding. But, you know, we're told we need white ribbon accreditation. We need a violence against women and girls strategy. We haven't cracked on like Reading have, but we're going to at least know how we're going to measure it so we can go forward.
We will bring back a report in July as is asked for on the anti-abuse charter, and we will include measurements in terms of work that's been undertaken in respect of that.
Thank you, Laura. Marie-Louise.
Thank you. We spoke last time about the broadness of the strategy and the need to generate like specific actions that would have a measurable impact on women and girls in Wokingham. And we talked about the learning by doing, actually by engaging in projects and then using that learning to feed into more projects, because the danger, as we've said before, is that a strategy can just seem to chunter on with its own momentum, and it doesn't actually engage with people or have any visible, improvement. And it's by actually trying to do things, that's how we learn to do things. We have to accept the possibility of failure and so on. But so I wondered if where in this there is like when do we actually start undertaking engagements, and are we using every opportunity? Because, for example, the audit of car parks, now that is absolutely a way in which you could engage with communities, organisations like Safer Space for Girls, who've done excellent work on how to make parks, public spaces, safer for girls and more comfortable for girls as well. So I worry that we're kind of reinventing the wheel by going back and start saying that we have to start from quite a low level of we have to gather more data, we have to get more understanding. There are, you know, a lot of work, as Laura says, in other boroughs, in neighbouring boroughs has been done, but in the wider area as well. Maybe we could start with some actions, you know, and learn from those to make parks less, you know, if you could take two simply from talking to people. I'm not saying that you should, but, you know, the one is about harassment in public parks of younger teen girls, and how you can make the parks more friendly to this group that, you know, loses public visibility magically sort of from the age of 12. And the other is this issue about the low reporting of domestic violence as against the endemic nature of domestic violence. And we know that one of the reasons it's not reported is because the almost impossibility of, you know, getting access to a refuge or alternative housing. Yeah, I mean, you know, we know these things already, you know, but so can we not build on what we know rather than starting, you know, with this data gathering and data analysis, because a lot is known and understood already.
So yeah, thank you for that. What I would say is, with the information that we have and clear data and evidence that allows us to do the work locally, we will be undertaking, for example, you use the example there of car parks. We do know that the majority of our car parks, that some of our car parks, have already the Park Safe Award, especially some of the newer ones. So that means they are very well lit. They have CCTV. They are, you know, they don't have any closed, enclosed spaces that would make people feel unsafe, and so on and so forth. So we're aware of that. What we are unclear about is, for example, which ones of our car parks don't have that sort of good practice park, clear park award, and what work may need to be done in those, and if indeed they are utilised in a space and in a time where they are making people feel unsafe, or are they not used in hours of darkness and therefore don't really have an issue with lighting, or don't have an issue with the way they're making the users feel. So what we don't want to do also is assume that there is national evidence that we apply locally that could be a slight mismatch of the resources that we currently have, which are quite limited to provide you know, adaptations or improvements in the most needed spaces, and to prioritise the most needy things that victims or survivors are telling us that they really require locally. So nationally, we'll be taking that data and overlaying it with some of the information that we'll be getting from victim survivors locally. And I think that's the challenge for us locally, is to try and get the information around local victim survivors to make sure that we are getting this strategy and the action plan correct for us in this space for Wokingham, as opposed to taking, I don't know, things that other places might be doing, for example, other Thames Valley areas that actually are not of a concern to our demographic locally, or people locally don't have experience of that, and therefore they might leave them feeling a little bit unsure as to why we've decided to do and implement those changes, as opposed to something that they're really feeling quite concerned about, and we may not even have registered that that's what they're feeling concerned and unsafe about. So that's sort of some of the key challenges, but we are overlaying that with, like I said, evidence where it does exist for us on a wider basis that we can draw into this piece of work as well.
I think, I mean, what Lorinda said is very true, that yes, you look at the national data, but Wokingham is particular, and we need to look at local data to see what's appropriate locally.
No one would disagree with that, but what you know, we're in danger of that people aren't heard until you listen to them, yeah? And that's not how it should work. You know, there are local organisations that have been working here a long time and have expressed priorities. So we could you know, maybe start with one of those again to get some kind of visible, measurable change, and then see where we go from there. You know, very often when you start a strategy, there is this temptation to sort of say we're going to understand everything about, or you know, we're going to understand a lot about a situation. All I'm saying is that there can be there should be a balance between that and actually action to demonstrate what it is you want to do and how you want to do it in terms of mobilizing the community and working with, you know, local partners who will have much more expertise and experience than we do.
Yeah, I mean, we work quite with partners such as Kaleidoscopic and so on, and we do make sure that we're trying to listen to the victims and things like that. And it's a both and rather than either or. And I quite agree with you. You know, you've got to hear what's being said before you know what's happening. So you know, we're trying to make sure that we do that.
Thank you, Marie-Louise. Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. An observation first and then a question for David. You talked about car parks. I mean, if you ask Jess Hislop, who isn't many miles away, he will tell you exactly which car parks have got CCTV, safe areas, lighting, etc., etc., etc. in the Woking Borough estate. If you talk to the parish councils, they'll tell you all about theirs. I can't see that taking more than a couple of days. I don't see why it's so difficult. So that's the point on car parks. I think, David, I heard you say nobody's responsible for this and they just do things on it ad hoc when they have time. Is that right?
There isn't one person who's you know got this as their main agenda. It's a group of people who do it together. So that is, there can be other priorities, and that's why sometimes it takes longer than I would like, and I'm sure we would all like.
So I think that you then become the central thread as the executive member, and I'd like to ask you what your governance is on this and how you monitor the delivery dates and the performance to the KPIs and the detailed plans that have been set forward.
I'll be quite honest, I only took this role over on the 1st of December, so we've had one meeting so far, and yes, we're trying to. I'm getting to know it. I'm afraid I don't know everything immediately, and you know I expect to understand that.
So did you inherit no structure and no governance?
Yes, and there's structure and so on, but it's getting to know what's happening, getting to know the action plans and so on.
What governance structure and monitoring did you inherit?
I have a meeting with Narendra every 2 weeks, and that's and that's the first thing that we do. And then yes, and when we go through, I mean, we've been going through, obviously we went through this because this is coming up and so on, but we go through things and we make sure that, things are happening and so on. She's got some dates down, her what will happen in the action plan. I will make sure that those are happening and things like that.
So was that in place before you took over? The governance on dates and deliverables and metrics and what's happening and whether it's happening on time and how successful it's being, was that already in place? Because I think Narendra talked about there being detailed plans, it's just that they aren't here. And what I want to know is how you as exec member and your predecessor monitored the detailed plans.
Well, obviously, I mean, I can't speak for my predecessor, but I'm getting to grips with the detailed plans and so on, and starting to read them and things, and starting to find out what's happening.
So there was no handover between you and the previous exec member?
Yes, we talked and so on, and we did handover. But there's a lot of quite detailed things, especially in the other action plans and so on. And so it's for me to get to know them.
Yes, Laura, please.
So I'm just trying to understand the process of measuring how this will tangibly help women and girls in the borough. So at the end of this year, the end of action plan year 1, is there going to be a measurement of victims of violence and also schoolgirls and also other women, or do tell me, because I'm just guessing, because I can only go on guesswork here. So we actually know if it's going in the right direction, and then that can be compared to the surveying, the research, the data compared to year 2 and year 3. So at the end of the strategy of year 3, we know this strategy's worked. We've gone in the right direction. Is my guesswork right in that, or is there no structure like that?
So I think, like I've said previously, there's a number of different action plans that have a number of different KPIs and measures within them that we can pull up and put into the smart timelines for this action plan, which we can do to make a clearer picture of measurables. What we can also do is use, for example, some of the national data that's come out that tells us the general trend in movements in this area of work. So we know that violence against women and girls has increased nationally. We know locally there is an underreporting of violence against women and girls, which is why we're keen to hear from victim survivors that perhaps are not so confident in coming forward to access current services that are in place, and overlay all of those different pieces of information together with very hard quantitative data around numbers of people engaged, number of different workshops and training delivered around this area of work, to bring a comprehensive picture of the work that's been delivered to enable a clearer outline of the deliverables within the strategy. So together with a combination of all of that, we will be able to provide some smarter timelines and some clear information about what has worked. And as was recognised earlier, there will be some areas that possibly we will be able to take some learning away from and be able to improve how we can increase or change, further develop some of that work as well.
Thank you. So it's clear to me that there doesn't seem to be any governance right now, because Councillor Hare, I know you're new to it, but Narinda, you didn't pipe up and say anything. So I think that's very telling. So there's also the issue of what I just asked, and there seems to be no plan to actually measure how this is affecting women and girls across the borough at all. So I think this needs to be looked at urgently, because this has been a year and a half of a strategy. Reading Council was light years ahead of doing practical things. So I'd recommend you go back, look at it, come back with what the governance structure is, what the measurement is, actually put it in front of us like we asked for it last time. I don't know why it's secret, it shouldn't be secret. So we can actually look at this and talk about when it can go into the work programme ASAP.
Yeah, so in respect of the governance structure, that was actually outlined in the strategy that you had as a draft before and was approved by this committee. So the governance structure outlined that the VORG strategy would be through a governance reporting line through the Community Safety Partnership, which is where the governance lies for the strategy and both the action plan. So that's the governance structure for monitoring the work around the strategy. In respect of the governance structures with other plans that also contribute towards the action plan, those are through the Community Safety Partnership, but also through other various different governance structures as well that we can outline when we bring a smart action plan back that's clearer as has been requested.
But you're going to send it
Laura,
to us before that, aren't you? As
Laura,
you said earlier.
can I just hold you there, please? I am mindful that this topic is going on and is repeating itself to a certain extent. So I haven't listened to everything that's going on, and Narinda, you are answering every question, but it is like you say, there is a lot to do. There's a lot to go on. There's a lot to be seen. I look at this documentation and I do have certain agreements on some of the comments that have been made. So we are looking for the team to bring forward the smart elements. I'm mindful that it's unlikely to be in this year. It's more likely to be June or July next later on in this year after the elections. I wouldn't want to put additional pressure on you to bring something forward to June, considering you're coming back to the committee in July. So we're looking for July as the out edge of this. This being come back to us for this. I would also make a couple of comments that when it comes to the places where women and children need to be looked out for, where we need to make the environment safe. It's not just the environment. You don't have to be stationary to be abused. And I would, it's not anecdotal, it's evidential, proven that women cyclists get abused constantly by bystanders, by car drivers, etc. So you don't have to be in one place to be abused. And you don't have to end up in hospital to be a victim. So there are many instances activities that do lead women to feel unsafe and unhappy about their environments. So I take it on board, Laura, what you're asking for. I do appreciate that there is a lot to be done in here, and I also look at this and say a question to you, Narinda. Do you think there's enough staff to be able to do this? Because there's an awful lot of work to be done in here, a lot to go on. Do you feel that the different groups have the staffing to be able to do this, considering it isn't one overall element that's managing it, apart from yourselves? It looks a little bit disjointed. I know it isn't, because I understand that all of these teams are working together trying to come up with the same progress. But do you feel that the teams have got enough staff or time to energy to put into producing this?
I think one of the things that we've tried to do is to not preempt what the voices of the victims may tell us in terms of the actions that we need to take. So within this action plan, we believe that the resources exist because of the cross-cutting nature of the work and the actions that are outlined in this action plan. So those resources are manageable. But in terms of being quite clear, this is work that is part of a larger work stream with officers. So resourcing currently is right for this action plan to be delivered in the sort of timelines that are outlined in some of the deeper action plans, as I've explained in some of the answers. But if we're told when we get feedback from some of the other organisations and victims that we're working with, and we don't know what those asks are, then we will have to have a look at whether the resourcing and the deliverable ask is available within the team that we've currently got. So yeah, we would have to review that once we're told from the victims and the survivors what it is that they would like to see us concentrate on and do and deliver.
Thank you, Narinda. Laura, if you'd like to wind up, please.
So Narinda kindly said that the SMART objectives already exist, so they can be sent to us well before the June-July meeting. So I'd like to see those as soon as possible. I mean, I did ask for them a year and a half ago, and I was assured they'd be here. We asked them in the last ONS meeting, was assured they'd be here tonight. And again, they're not. So if we could be sent them ASAP, that would be great.
And also, Chairman, we did say a year and a half ago that we were worried that there was too much scope in this strategy and that it therefore was too much for Narinda to cope with and that we should prioritise it. And I agree with you completely. I think there's a risk it's so broad that we don't actually get anything done.
Well, I'd like to disagree. I don't think anything's being done. I think there is a lot being done. It's just that it's not visible. It's just that it's not visible. I wouldn't say that nothing's being done. I just say that the visibility is limited, and that's the main thing.
So we can't see anything being done. I agree that doesn't mean there isn't anything being done, but you also can't see anything being done, so therefore you don't know that anything's being done. I asked David how he was monitoring it, and he said he's only just taken it over. I asked him about the KPIs and governance that had been set up by his predecessor, and he didn't seem to know about it. We're now being told that the partnership board or whatever it was that was monitoring it, but I mean, I don't know, David, are you on that? Sorry? Community Safety Board, sorry. Are you on that, David?
Yes. I haven't been to a meeting yet.
I mean, you're new to it. I'm not having a go at you at all, but it seems to me you've been left in a bit of a morass of ungoverned, invisible deliveries that need to get delivered.
So considering those views, looking at what we have as a work stream for ourselves, and what it would take for you to bring this to the committee. There isn't an opportunity for the committee to sit and discuss this in any great depth. An overview could be possible in the March, but I don't think the February meeting is far enough away for you to be able to pull it together to make it an item that stands out on its own without a lot of support from yourselves and the other groups. So the target that Laura and Pauline referred to is something I think we should be able to get something meaningful for the committee for March. Any greater depth, you're already dealing with that for July, so that will be the next point. So we've got two targets in there, March and July. I don't see that a KPI is going to help us any great deal to say we've met a KPI, because a KPI would be there's no women and children being abused. That would be the best one. That's the topic, that there are no women and children being admitted to hospital because they're being abused. There are lots of other KPIs in there to see whether or not the team are delivering what was been asked for, but delivering what's being asked for here doesn't necessarily mean that the victims are going to get what they need. So there's a lot in here. Please, Laura. There's a lot in here that is targeting what we want to do, be respectful, do this, do that, do something else, but it relies on other people. It's not just the team of officers that are going to do this. There's lots of other groups that are going to put their effort into it, and it's not just a single case of one person's got to be responsible to bring it all together. It needs all of them to work together to bring all these different groups, and that I see is, like you say, it's a lot. There's a lot to go on in there, and it is a lot for one person or one small team of people to do. So our target to start off with will be the observations that there are things that haven't been delivered that has been asked for in the past, and I can see from the volume of different items and different objectives and priorities that there is a lot to do, and it's not something that's going to be achieved overnight. I appreciate your urgency, your feeling for the urgency that we need to do something. Well, no, we can't keep going saying Reading Council does it better than us, because Reading Council's got more funding and they've got a bigger problem to deal with, so their metrics are going to be slightly different. There are all sorts of different variations. Taking one borough to another is not a direct comparison when you consider the different scenarios, different environment, and other bits and pieces. I appreciate your comment, and
nothing to show for it.
They have put an awful lot of work and their own time into this.
I appreciate
find that very, very difficult.
I appreciate that, Councillor Hare, and we did ask for timelines and information, and it hasn't been brought back. I don't know why.
Laura, I have to stop you there, and I don't want to stand up. So we've got actions that we've agreed on. There are actions that you've asked for. Narendra has taken on board what to do. We've got some target dates, some minimum target dates that we're looking for to bring something back. And I hope that will satisfy this particular item at the moment. And the last word, Peter, that'll be the closing item for this.
So, not trying to be contentious here, just to say there has been proof of stuff going on. Is it possible to just say you've conducted so many interviews over a particular period and have some very quick, rough data that can be sent out to the committee to actually show there is work ongoing? Because I believe there is work ongoing. Again, it's just visibility. I think that's the issue. And just consider, yes, I can put some very small data points out that can be sent out in the next couple of days to this committee to say there is work ongoing and here's some of the proof.
That's not an issue to do because we can pull it out from the detailed plans that lie underneath. So we can provide the committee with some headline work as to what's being achieved around some of these actions. Yeah.
Thank you, Narendra. I would like to wrap up this particular session. So Narendra and David, thank you very much for your time, and Rajan, I do understand it's a difficult subject, but thank you very much. Okay, that brings us on to the medium-term financial plan. And Imogen and Graham, who would like to introduce this topic?
Imogen will say a few words to start off with.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Hello, right. Just seeing where we are. I've lost my reports. There it is. Okay. This report that you've got in front of us includes the final changes that were made following the presentation to the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee late last year, the series of meetings that I think most of you attended. Yeah. And it gave you the opportunity to review our budget for next year. It's important to note this year was the first year for a long while where we did a consultation with the public, which I feel is an important part of the budget setting process. And we were able to see all of the information that was provided in that consultation, and it was attached in Appendix B if you're online, but in here it's just budget survey, it's called. I would personally like to see this continue for ongoing process so that there is some, so the public got a view of what's going on with our budget. But I think we need to think about ways that ensure that we're seeking views from a wide range of people who represents all of our residents in the borough. I don't know if you've looked at the data, but as you can see, the numbers now in our report here has been updated, and I'm very happy to see that there are now no gaps in the capital budget for next year. But we still have, I'm not allowed to call it a gap, am I, Graham? We have a little bit of a thing with revenue, but the revenue is day-to-day spending required to keep our services going, such as staff wages and paying the electricity bill. Capital is the more tangible things, such as schools and roads. And this money is usually made from grants and developer funding for various projects, including infrastructure. The gap in capital has been closed, taking a good look at the expected projects for reprofiling and then ensuring that they're aligned with when the work can be done. And some items have also been removed. The revenue can only be bridged from earmarked reserves for next year, but no doubt if other ways can be found, we would use them. The reserves that will be used are there to protect us from shortfalls in council tax collection and shortfalls in government funding, as the government has only provided us with an extra £667,000 on the core spending grant this year to cover the inflation and the cost of funding salary increases. It seems appropriate to use it. The core spending may be considered as 7%, but as soon as the council is increasing the council tax by 4.99% and 7% of not very much is still not very much. It won't even cover the basics that we need to cover of the annual living wage increases needed due to the cost of living. However, what we are proposing is to boost the general fund reserve, which is a critical and brings us up to a safer level than we were last year. In all, we have to find 17.3 million to cover our revenue costs for this coming year, and it was always going to be a difficult one. We have significant overspends in children's services with childcare placements and rising educational transport costs. Over 3 million will need to come from staff savings. Every manager needs to reduce their headcount this year and next year, and will be largely done by holding vacancies over and not recruiting. We will be reducing the workforce by 9% over the 2 years. We'll also be driving down the number of agency posts and consultants. It's important to keep these numbers low, and we will do this by making sure Woking Borough Council is a desirable place to work. The future funding for years 25 to 26 and 26 to 27 is still uncertain because we have yet again only received a 1-year settlement from central government. It makes it harder to plan ahead if we are not sure what income we will have, and this presents a significant risk to the council ongoing. The final update of this report will be presented to the Budget Council next month, and there'll be more information presented about this year at our executive meeting on Thursday. I shall now let Graham do his thing. How's that for an offer?
Okay. All right, I'll try my best. Okay, this is the finale as far as ONS is concerned this year, or this year's budget setting process. Exactly. But of course, you get to see this, all councillors get to see this at full council in February. I just want to run through key pages in the what's called the supplementary document. And page 10 sets out my strategic considerations that I want to bring to your attention. I won't go through everything, and Imogen has highlighted some of these already, but I think it's worth stressing. It's the settlement is for 1 year only, 24-25, and the fundamental reform of local government finance will not happen until year 3 of this MTFP, 26-27 at the earliest. The statutory override is in respect of the DSG balance, deficit balance, that was forecast to reach levels of about 50 million deficit. And the statutory override in place until March 26 protects that from the council taxpayer and means it just sits as a DSG, it's schools related education issue. I suspect that will be extended, but it's interesting that it hasn't been. Household Support Fund, no continuation of that. Just some other things to tease out. Probably the use of capital flexible receipts. That has been extended to March 2030. So that this is the ability to dispose of an asset and turn that capital receipt into revenue on the proviso that that revenue item is for an investor save, investor contain activity, and on the proviso that it's in the treasury management strategy. So it has to be the capital receipt has to come in, has to be a legitimate thing to spend upon, and it must be in the strategy. And I'm seeking to incorporate that for executive first to consider as it receives the treasury management strategy, obviously that goes on to council. The rest, I think, has been eloquently covered by Imogen, and I'll pick up the detail. Page 12 sets out the local government finance settlement. I won't, obviously, lots of rhetoric around that. And all I can say is the impact of that has been factored in to the latest summary position. The capital update shown, page 11 shows what it was. Page 14 shows what it was. Page 15 shows all the changes that have worked in a positive way to arrive at page 16, which shows a year 1 balanced budget, modest, but still considerable work to be done to address 4 million that will immediately present itself in year 2. And then another 4 million in year 3, subject to no further pressures materialising, given 8.5 million over the 3-year period. Page 19 shows what has previously been considered here, all of those figures culminating in a 5 million rounded budget gap. Page 20 shows the key changes that have happened, have arisen since that summary was first produced back at the end of September, presented to this committee at the very beginning of October. And the key changes in page 20, you will have heard from Prue Bray, Matt Pope, and the team. Homeschool transport being the most significant figure, and there was at the very beginning a savings target that was in there, which wasn't achievable from a net position perspective. Page 21 shows some other changes that do not sit directly in the service budget, so they sit in the bottom half of the calculation or the table. Page 22 is the revised position, and that incorporates all of the changes in the local government finance settlement, all the updates in growth and savings, and very significantly, the ongoing budget gap of 4.7 million, which is then balanced through a transfer from reserves made up of council tax collection fund and the reserve we'd set aside for fairer funding. Page 24 shows the changes in special items, all in adults and children's, and then 25 is the new special items total. Page 27 has been updated to show the latest position on adult social care inflation, which has increased the total in 24-25 to £11.7 million rounded. Page 29 is deliberately shown to convey the fact that it's always important for the council in terms of, I'll call it as loose hand back office. This isn't back office alone. This will be all of the staffing across the council. So it's our workforce. And it shows quite a significant contribution was made to the overall savings target in 23-24, 3.36 million. That's obviously this year's budget. But I thought it was important to show that in the context, that was as context for the 24-25 proposals, and the cumulative effect over the 2 years is £6.9 million or 9% of the overall workforce budget, which I think is important to recognise from two perspectives. This council is not about just passporting the problem to frontline services, fees and charges, uplifts or what have you. It is trying to do everything it can to reduce its ongoing running costs. However, this will be extremely challenging. It was interesting in the previous item about how much resource was available to deliver on a high expectations on a delivery plan. There will be many delivery plans across the council that will be under pressure. Obviously, when you take a cumulative 9% out of the workforce, it will obviously be done in the most targeted, considered way and through using natural turnover, which tends to be about 11-12%, and holding posts vacant or filling them in the most flexible ways to reduce redundancies for two reasons. One, redundancies are often expensive, and secondly, they're often the most stressful part, anxiety generating part of reducing headcount. It's much easier when either they're not filled at all or filled through a fixed term contract or a short term known appointment. So the conclusion on page 32, probably the very first bullet point, probably wouldn't surprise you. The extent of the challenge, I think, is laid out in the next 3 bullet points. So we have to achieve 11.8 million in 23-24 this year. We then have to go on and achieve 12.6 million the following year. And because of that roll forward of the 4 million or so, because it's one-off funded, there's it adds to the other 4 million challenge that was there. I mean, just shy of £9 million in 25-26. In that context, the capital gap does look quite modest and quite reassuring. However, quite a lot of work's gone on in this space, and the hardest yards are yet to be trod, if there's such a terminology. Then page 33 sets out the budget summary already introduced by Imogen. From me, Chairman.
I really don't know where to start. So I'm going to open it to the floor. Pauline, please.
Thank you very much, Graham and Imogen. That was a very good summary. A couple of questions. The first one is about your manpower changes. Now, I'm quite keen to see a reduction in high-end contractors and indeed staff that are in the wrong place. But I'm a little bit worried about us just assuming that the natural wastage is going to happen in the right place And I understand why you don't want to make redundancies because of the expense. But in your experience, is the attrition likely to be in the right place where you want it to be rather than in the wrong place, which is highly skilled people that are working on things that actually genuinely and directly benefit the public?
You're absolutely right, Pauline. The natural attrition will not take place in all the right places. It's therefore, there's two things there. Is recognizing that's only part of the solution. There will be the need for, and there is currently, organisation service redesign going on as we speak, and will continue throughout this year and will continue into future years. So it's only one of the tools or the opportunities that presents itself. There's the other point is the longer one can run the regime of keeping the workforce flexible, then it increases the likelihood that more will be falling in the right places.
Thank you. So the next question was about reserves. If I read page 21 right, you're using reserves to fund the gap. Could you, I'm not saying now, but you provided us a very nice summary last year of the reserves and where they all were. Could you do the same to show us the impact of this reserves, what's the word, attrition on the what you expect it to be like next year?
Well, I rather than create a whole piece of work, I can give you the answer right now. So there's 4.7 million, 1.5 million pounds will come from the council tax collection fund, which has currently a surplus of between 5 to 6 million, which is not seen to be ongoing. It's just the surplus position built up at this point in time, which will be released throughout the 3-year period down to, well, in the context of the size of the collection fund, pretty much break even. So I'm comfortable that 1.5 million of that can be taken, and I am hopeful and expectant it will be able to be used for other one-off costs over the life of the 3-year MTFP, for example, special items to fund those. The other place of funding will be the fair the provision that we set aside for the fair funding review that had a balance of about 19 million pounds that will be reduced down to 16 million pounds by applying the balance being 3.2 million-ish of that fund. And that will be reflected in the MTFP. So that's the only thing I could send you if I was going to update all of the earmarked reserves, because there wouldn't be time to do anything more.
So are you telling me the others largely haven't changed?
Oh, crikey, no, reserves change all the time. I committed to this overview and scrutiny that I would bring back on an annual basis and show changes. And what I also committed to was explaining if I was going to use one-off money from those reserves, I would explain it to you, which I've included in this paperwork and I'll include in the MTFP.
So I understand that things do change. So there's no other large sums being taken out of reserves that you haven't mentioned, and there's no other large sums being put into reserves that you haven't mentioned. Is that correct?
Well, in the context that reserves are changing all the time, including, say, business, or lots of changes in business rates, council tax, or it's a fluid landscape, things go on. What I can tell you is in terms of funding this budget, which was the commitment I said I would give you, there is no secret drawdown or anything going on to fund that gap. That 4.7 million comes from those two places described. But to say that a fluid landscape, give you any commitments about exactly what's happened, I can't do that without doing the work properly, because things happen without me having to permit it.
No, I think you're answering my question actually, Graham. I wasn't asking for sort of the normal fluctuations in daily life. What I'm saying is, are there any, as part of this budget, are there any areas where you're putting large sums into reserves or any times when you taking large sums out? Now, I think there was an item that you were actually putting reserves in as well. Is that right?
Yes, right. So in previous year, well, of course we have in previous years, otherwise we wouldn't have the reserves. Exactly. They come from somewhere. They will be itemized in the MTFP, and I believe they will be at the lowest level that I can ever remember any contribution being, recognizing contributions come out to fund one-off costs and contributions go in. One thing I can say is that what we used to provide for an MRP reserve, I'll now be hardwiring in as an ongoing budget. So even that ongoing contribution will now cease. So I think the answer is very little, but I'd have to check. I haven't got to producing the final summary with all those in. So I don't want to mislead you, but I'm also saying there's not going to be a lot, if there is any, and the substantial drawing down will be from that fairer fund reserve.
I think the only one I was thinking about, and I'm still trying to get my head around your negatives and your positives, so apologies. The previous gap funded from the one-off PFI reserve, is that putting some of the money back into the PFI reserve that it's on page 19?
No, it's not putting the money back in. Page 19 will be recognising that it was funding last year, so therefore presents itself now in 24-25 as an ongoing challenge, because to have it as zero, that's correct.
Final question from me is your adult social care inflation, you've increased by 0.4 million. Have you got a split of that between price and volume?
That is all price and takes the adult social care provision to 7%, which is going to be a challenge to work within.
So you're assuming no increase in volume, or have you already got the increase in volume in there and it was the price that you hadn't got in?
The increase in volume, using page, I use the latest page. So using page 22 is shown on the very first line. Adult social care growth, 3.2 million, will address the volume. The inflation is addressed through the 11.65 inflation. So it deliberately detaches volume and inflation.
Or I thought I understood you until you mentioned 11.65.
Okay, so if you take the very first line, adult social care growth, 3.2 million. You see that one on 24-25 year one? 3.2 mil,
yep.
Then goes to 5.3. Yep. One of, or probably a number of the budget bids, growth bids, will address demand, increase in demand. Then if you run down the below the total of 343k, run down to inflation brackets payroll plus contractual inflation 11,654. That provides for the adult social care inflation, which is dealt with, which is broken down on page 27 and shows that of the total £11.654 million inflation provision, 4.126 million is adult social care.
So, sorry, just one final point, just so I make sure I understand it. So you're saying that the 0.4 million is all price. So what you did was estimate the volume. You haven't changed the volume estimates, but you've increased the amount of price increase you think you're going to have?
This is purely around assessing the general uplift in the adult social care market that will basically the environment that the team will be faced with trying to find placements within.
So what sort of pricing percentage are you expecting in adult social care, roughly?
But I'd rather not go into too
That's
much
right.
detail
I
because
can
this is.
understand why you don't want to go. Yeah, okay.
It's very difficult to predict the future, and things like COVID come along.
Sorry, I'm only asking him his assumptions. I'll ask him later.
Yeah, but if the reserves are there. I think COVID comes along, we need to go to the reserves.
Yeah, we told you that when we were in control, and you told us that we were wasting money. I think if I remember correctly.
I don't remember saying that, but that's what the reserves are for. So.
Just I'm reading and thinking. No, it was normal first, and then you can fight over it afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, I was just looking at the capital summary on pages 14 through to 60. I'm just trying to get my head around the numbers. And you've said in the note at the end that you're still working on the sort of carry forward. So I guess there's still figures to go into the table on page 14 in the funded by section there, because I can't read through from you've included the carry forwards in page 14, but not in your page 16. So I can't get my head around what funded by. So that's just a comment. Is that going to be updated in the MTFP? Will we have those figures when they finally appear?
Oh, sorry. So yes, I appreciate your point. It's slightly different presentation, is it? Because of that note explaining the carry forwards. I think certainly the purpose of council is to agree the 24-25 bids, but I'll need to make sure as possible. I don't see why it's not, but we should include the carry forwards for completeness if we can. I understand that request, and I'll seek to do that unless there's a good reason why we can't.
Okay, it just allows comparison of numbers. And then the main point really was the changes from that presented on the 2nd of October. So we've got 84 million for 24-25 and 73.5 million now presented. And there's one new line, the HRA's come in at 10.6. So there's actually quite a substantial change between those numbers, like 23 million in changes, which of course matches what you've taken out to make it 0. It's given the changes from the previous ONS table on page 15, but that only adds up to about 4 or 5 million. So I just wonder how we can get our head around what's been taken out to arrive at the sort of 62 million instead of the 84 million. How can we work out what's been removed from the capital budget for this coming year?
Okay, the intention of this was to focus on the schemes that were the impact of schemes in terms of the change from one table to the other. There's the whole funding issue, the income side of it, that I would need to bring into play to give you. It wasn't intended to be a full reconciliation from one to the other. It was just to highlight the schemes. But if that's, let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, I can see it's not easy to compare on the funding side because one has the carry forward in and one doesn't. I'll have to drop the committee a note on that to give a fuller reconciliation between pages 14 and 16, recognising that the delay in or curtailment of schemes is only part of the story.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, children's services, for example, is about 10 million sort of being removed there. So just to be useful to know. Thank you. I think I had one more. Just this is a question. Page 21, the retained business rates income benefit. We've got a benefit of 1.53 million. So that's a benefit, isn't it? In brackets.
That's
What is that?
yeah. That's correct. It is the bracket.
Just wondered what arises from. What's the general reason for that, please?
Okay, so just to talk the committee through this. So page 21 shows the 1.53 million pounds, which then if you go to page 22, you see a line called under inflation called retained business rates, which is indeed a credit. So inflation is a charge, debit, retained business rates is a credit. We have to, well, as part of the overall council's finances, we look at our business rates collection fund and our business rates debits. So we look at growth in properties, business properties, and see whether they appear sustainable. So what effectively I'm saying is I can bring out an ongoing 1.5 million pounds worth of business rates credit as a result of both the increase in businesses and the increase in the business rate multiplier, which is the charge on the businesses. I will say that, although I think it's right to do that, because it's with the best knowledge I have, this is our ongoing credit base. There is a concern in the background of the business rates regime could always be subject to revaluation. And if we were revalued back down to our original baseline, so in the world of winners and losers, we would potentially lose. So I think it's right to do it, but it is something we need to be cautious of, factoring in growth in business rates.
Laura.
Thank you. Graham, on household support fund, you said no continuation of that. In here, it says no decision yet. I know we're still waiting for the government to make a decision. So I just want to be clear that that is the case and you're not privy to some other information of it's just not continuing at all.
Sorry, Laura, can you just point to the right page?
Oh, sorry, it's on page 10. So it's the fourth point down, household support fund. We're just waiting for the government to make a decision if it's going to be renewed. Current funding comes to an end in March. And just earlier you said no continuation of that. So I just didn't want anyone to sort of think, oh, the household support fund is definitely ending and that's that.
Yeah, apologies if I was that definitive. We haven't, I guess, we haven't been notified or assured of any continuation of it, and I was hoping and would have thought that would have come out at the time of the local government finance settlement. However, the fact that there has been no definitive statement that it's not continuing is quite unusual, because the messages that have come out everywhere else in terms of there will be no increase, say, in council tax or whatever, council tax referendum rate or other forms of funding, the government have been very clear that it's stopping or it will not increase. There seems to be quite a silent space. So a
heavy implication of one way rather than the other. We don't know though, ultimately.
Let's say it still leaves me with hope, although nothing has yet been announced. I'll take it. It's better than a
I
no.
very much hope they're going to continue it, but we don't know yet. So, sadly.
Thank you, Laura. Charles.
Excuse me. Thank you. Page 15 first. I think this should be a nice simple one. Electric vehicle charge points. Savings obviously there. I'm assuming that's because there was a grant previously for this, which is not happening. This is just a corrective line.
That's correct.
Right. The other one, page 22, just looking at some of these figures for children's services in terms of growth over savings, which are just very, very significant. I mean, I know there's lots of pressure on in terms of increasing demand, limited resources. I'm familiar with all of that, basically, from the years I spent involved with adult services. But if you just look at the comparable differences between the two lines here, in terms of the growth savings, you know, rowing right out to the end, children's services over 3 years, 11.8 million with savings of just under 4. Yeah, there's a gap there of, what's that, almost 8 million. Yeah, adults in comparison, there's a gap of just under 2 million. Now, I think, you know, I know children's services growth has been common ever since I was first elected onto the council in 2016. And I know that's driven by a lot of external factors, but I was just looking for some reassurance that behind the scenes there is a plan to forecast this accurately, get it under control, and actually, you know, stop this completely running away from us.
Yes, Charles, you raise a really significant point. Children's services is the area of most significant concern by a long way. It's reflecting itself in the revenue monitoring this year, and then it's obviously reflecting over the 3 years. And it is common and consistent with the national picture. Although adult social care is far from immune, the real overspends are in homeschool transport, children care leavers, costs. Exactly. So, and it's right that we talk about this at this forum. That this, if we had no growth in children's services, we would be sitting in a very much more comfortable place, much easier to find the solutions to our budgets. What I can tell you is, because of the reason you said, Charles, it is the time we spend most at corporate leadership team. So we have every Tuesday afternoon, we have enacted a gold, like emergency approach. Got golds and silver, and gold is CLT, and our focus has been to a very significant extent on homeschool transport from the beginning to the end, which means because the pressures are in the special education needs areas, mainstream is pretty flat in terms of growth. So it's about how we can intervene early at the very beginning of the system to ideally prevent the SEND issue escalating to requiring a big response. It's also understanding through the process the importance of getting the homeschool transport solution correct in terms of value for money. And then it's about making sure that the right provision is delivered at the right price, and obviously and those current users are helped to become self-sufficient, ideally, and make choices that are not are good for them and not high cost, and also good for the council in terms of the cost. So that's an example in homeschool, and we've put resource in terms of specialist know-how to help us. And we also are doing a similar thing with placements, so around specialist accommodation. So it obviously always starts with where the early intervention or prevention can sit, to then securing the best value for money solution. We heard housing, Wokingham Housing, talk about been part of that solution, but that's just one of many. For sure, it is right and proper that the senior officers at this council, who are very serious about making the council's finances safe and secure, spend time in this area. And our focus has also been supplemented by numerous external specialists considered to be best in this field, and indeed bringing in senior level competent capacity for a period of time to assist the management team. And obviously Matt Pope, as the executive director over both adults and children, will for sure bring any of the best practices that work well in adult social care and translate those into a children's services arena where that's possible. And so I think that's also another positive, in that I think we have, in terms of the executive director over the full remit, I think we have someone who's very passionate about a very business-minded and cost-conscious approach to this.
Chair, if I may, one final question, then that'll be it for me on this. Thank you. I think you've half answered my next question, but I think the concern why I raised this is when you look at the previous MTFP on 19 in here, you look at the 3-year figure, it's 8 million and it's ballooned out to just under 12 million. I note what you said basically about demand management, basically, which was a practice that I know we used in adult services and worked really well there, basically. And I know I had some correspondence with you about a year ago where you said that there was a plan to do this in children's services, not the Empower version that was used in adults, but a different version. Are we seeing in these kind of ballooning figures, actions that are taken now are going to take some time to actually impact financial figures? It might be 6 months, it might be 12, it might be 18. You know, a decision taken today that is always like that. When would you hope, let me be fair, basically, to see some of this coming back down the curve? And Chair, if I may suggest, I know forward items is something we'll discuss at the end. My personal view is this is something this committee should be putting on its work list for some point in the future, but I'd be willing to listen to what other people think on that.
Shall I answer? Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the version page 19, the version page 22 showed quite a significant increase in growth. I do believe, I will say, and I do believe, because I know the work that's gone in, I think that is a much more realistic expectation of the real growth pressures that we will see. And I think if you look back over the past years, invariably, if not always, over the past, say, 3 or 4 years, children's has shown an overspend very early on in the budget monitoring, which indicates that the budget wasn't set at the right level. It was underbaked, and so not only did a growth go in, but then an overspend on top of that growth materialized as well. I have more confidence that we will break that cycle of keep overspending in children's services. I'm not saying at all, and it's not a guarantee, but I feel much more confident because I think the estimate, the work that's gone in to create a realistic estimate is evident in that figure, albeit an unwelcome figure. And I think you see a much more modest growth in future years. So we have 7 million year one, then goes up by just over 2 million, and then goes up by just over 2 million. That is a reflection of the demand, first of all, a realistic budget, and then the demand management action that we expect to bear fruit.
Thank you, Charles. Norman. Just a couple of questions then. Just following on from the discussion we just had, have we done benchmarking of our children's services against other councils round about us? I'll just be interested to look at that. I mean, it's a long, long time ago, but I did some way back about 2008. I found that I think we spent more per head per child than anybody else other than Reading in Berkshire. I just wondered if we've done any benchmarking and see if we can learn any lessons from the councils roundabout.
Okay, the expenditure on children's services is in the lowest quartile in the country and will be probably the lowest in Berkshire. However, if you take the number of children, because we have one of the lowest number in terms of placements. However, if you just took those numbers in placements, you would find that they are one of the highest costs per head, which is as a result of something this council has lacked in many areas, which is its self-provision, self-sufficiency, and therefore it has to go and buy elsewhere at great cost. So part of this council's approach is to become much more self-sufficient, whether it's buying a care home, building a SEND school, or providing other forms of specialist accommodation, or even step down, step up type accommodation and support. So, yeah, I think I'm aware of the issue you raised. In a totality, we are not highest cost, but in terms of the cohort, we will be, and that's why. And therefore, the solution is to become more self-sufficient.
Thank you. And just to change the subject completely, we did the online survey and 488 people responded. And there's somebody in the back. Did that change anything that we put into the budget? Did we find that useful to the extent of changing anything in the budget?
We went through it, we looked at it. It certainly did change our thinking and focused our thinking. Some things did change, but it was kind of looking at it in a very analytical way. What people were saying was pretty much what we expected they would say. And it really was a review. We went through it all and looked at it in that way before we went through making changes to the budget.
You said you made changes as a result. What sort of changes did you make?
Gosh, I don't know. We did look at, I mean, I know there was a lot of comments about cycle lanes and things like that. We were looking at those and the kinds of projects that people wanted us to do versus what they didn't want us to do.
Are there any more questions? Peter, please.
Last one. Charles mentioned the one about the grants. Are there other areas within the budget where we are dependent upon grants that will hurt us?
The big area is all wrapped up in the local government finance settlement. So in there will be new homes bonus. That has been under question for some time and seems to limp on every year. This council's done pretty well out of new homes bonus. It's housing delivery. I think the key thing is this. If the settlement is based on the current understanding of need, and I stress I'm not making a political point, I'm making a point on behalf of this council. If it's based on the current understanding of need, which is primarily driven through the lens of deprivation, we will suffer because we're seen as currently low need and high resource. High resource because of our council tax, the amount that we collect through council tax, that we've had to collect through council tax because we don't have the grant. What is acutely apparent to me is that need is not just driven by deprivation, it's also driven by affluence. And I have, for example, a picture of Woking Borough Council, shaded in terms of all levels of deprivation, and where EHCP's postcoded against it. And it's quite revealing that actually the higher propensity of the EHCP is in areas of affluence, the most affluent, as opposed to come from deprivation. That's just one example. I'm saying that because I got the graph and I can see it. But there's others. For example, adult social care learning disabilities, if mapped against, I don't think that's a deprivation driven. Maybe waste collection and disposal, actually affluence drives more waste. So it's a long answer, but all of our grants will suffer unless we can convey an articulate argument for the fact that need is also driven by affluence and not just driven by deprivation. And because we are the most extreme in the country of any unitary authority anyway, we have Blackpool at one end and we have Wokingham at the other. And the amount of money per head that Blackpool get, if we received the same per head, we would receive an extra £120 million per annum. I'm not for 1 minute saying that Blackpool doesn't have more challenges than Wokingham because of its socio-economics, but I am questioning whether £120 million more difference when you've got the basic costs of running local government with all the challenges and regulations, and the fact that affluence also drives costs. Sorry, that's probably a longer answer than you expected.
No, that was very interesting. Thank you.
If that is it from the floor, I would like to say to Imogen and yourself, Graham, thank you very much for presenting this. And it's not so much a case of sticking your head on the chopping block. It gets close. And I do appreciate your candid responses. So as far as this topic goes, the recommendation in here is to recognise the imperative for responsible financial management in the current unprecedented financial circumstances and to consider the report, challenge proposals and identify further ideas to address the financial shortfall. I would also like to take note of Charles' comments, and I hope it's been copied well in the minutes, unless you want to repeat your request. I don't know, just to make sure. Do you want to put your mic on to do it? Thanks.
Trying to remember what it was now. I think I was suggesting that given the pressures in this area and the way the budget is ballooning, that say this comes back to this council. We hear continually basically about the council, and I'm not saying wrongly about the council's financial position and the threats to it. And I think, as a committee, perhaps we should be analysing this and seeing what steps, which you did, Graham, basically are in place to actually manage it.
Thanks, Charles. Sorry, Paul, sorry.
Just to add, Chair, that the committee each year in the past 4 or 5 years has written a short report pulling together its findings on the back of this process. So if members are happy, I will draft something, send it round for comment, and then the chair will finalise the report, which will then be added to the budget papers in February.
Yep, great. Thank you very much.
Chairman, could I just, it's your call, of course, but I was just conscious this children's services, the request of yours, Charles, is just be conscious, of course, there is a ONS for children's services. So is that the right place for that to happen? I just hear Matt talking in my ear there. So I just thought I had to say that.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's right that it's been pointed out, it's required. Pauline, please.
I understand what you say. I think this committee is particularly interested in finance. We're not interested in the rest of children's services. That didn't come out right, but you know what I mean. So whatever we do, wherever it goes, let's just do it once. I think that's the key.
I think it's something that needs to be done jointly because there are the considerations. We don't drive the need or the general overview and scrutiny for the children. No, they don't. It is what it is. But yeah, I think it's something we should jointly discuss with that committee to make sure that we're both aware that we don't tread on each other's feet, toes, whatever. So with that, we will await the summary and give us the opportunity to comment on it for the February meeting because it is an exec. And I would like to make a statement here that Peter, can you chair the meeting on the 4th of March because I won't be available because I've got a medical intervention to deal with. Okay, thanks. With that, thank you very much for your time. You don't have to stay. You can go. There's no.
Still angry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And with that, let's have a look at the next item. Page 55. So if we go to page 55, the work programme. So we have a couple of committee requests for 20th of February. So are there any changes to the requests that are going in there? Anything anybody wants to add to the 28th of February, apart from what we already have agreed? Graham. Okay. 4th of March. Any observations? There is one for ourselves, is that the task and finish group for litter bins, we do need to get that started. It's a point. I know we commented. We had a conversational quick comment. Have we got a last number from a name from your group?
I've yet to find another volunteer. I'm reluctant to take it on myself because I've got too many other things to do.
Volunteer them.
Okay.
Will you be an objection if I tap someone on the shoulder?
Not at all.
I will tap someone on the shoulder.
Well, tell me who you think I should target.
Oh no, they're going to get a shock. We will see. So, so we can get that final name for the for this meeting on the 4th, so we can get that started. Action tracker.
Sorry, Chris. On the, just want to ask a question on the 4th of March, flood risk management.
Sorry.
The 4th of March, we've got the flood risk management.
Yep.
I know we've had quite a bit of adverse weather lately. I'd like some detail of how the flood risk management strategy dealt with the current
whether the flood defences worked would be the biggest question.
Yes.
There are a lot of places it hasn't, and how any flood defences affected the Woking.
Yeah, actually put the strategy into a practical thing.
Yep.
Just to say that, I mean, tonight we've looked at councils, housing companies, but last week at Overview Institute Management we looked at affordable housing strategy, and perhaps they should go to the same committee because there seem to be a lot of what we talked about last week that's been talked about this week. So perhaps they should be on the same.
What would be your test and take it away from here or leave it here? You're the chair on the other side. Do you want the workload?
So just to clarify, it was intended that tonight's item would go to the management committee to have that joined up approach, but because of staff leave, the relevant officers couldn't make the next meeting of the management committee. That's why it came here. So I think in future it would go to the management committee and join up the two issues.
Gives us less work to do. Unless you're on the other committee as well. There you go. So you can't get away with it whether you like it or not. So I think that's the action tracker. So to agenda item 91, sorry, the action tracker. That's flood risk management. Okay. Any comments on any of the items on page 57? comments on page 58? Yes, sorry, Laura.
So yes, on page 58, the meeting of the 3rd of July, obviously we talked about the draft violence against women and girls strategy, and the comments and feedback were given to the officers, but obviously it wasn't taken on board. So is there something we can do in the action for all these to make sure that it's actually taken on board? Because otherwise we can end up just going round in circles.
I do agree with that. It has taken a long time for elements that we've been asked for to come forward, and there are those gaps. And I agree completely with what you're saying there, that we've got a statement that says completed and worded update in January 24. We are here in January 24, and the update brought a lot to us. But like you say, there is a lot of information that would have been much more helpful if it had been there.
July was a long time ago now. That's 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? Because I think this was a bit of a waste of time.
Repeating the activity in a short time frame, and say having it brought to us 4 times a year, is going to bring more and more workload into the here. So it's about making sure that we do ask for is quality checked on the way down, that it's on track. So I think a question in our process would be, if we've got something that's 6 months away, we put a marker in saying 3 months after, are you on track? We just need to get that confirmation that he's likely to be on track, or if there's any hold-ups or something. So if there are any hindrances that the different teams find, that we're aware of them beforehand, so that we don't know, one, we don't push them into coming forward when they haven't got the details, or what our expectations are shattered with what we were expecting. So I would suggest that we have a comment put into this, that when tasks are being not assigned but agreed, that there is also a halfway point that we get a feedback point.
Yeah, I think one of the issues from what I could see was going on seemed to be a big gap between the old exec member and the new exec member, and it didn't seem to me like the handover had been very effective. So David didn't really know what had been promised, I don't think. So I think that's something that, so it wasn't that they didn't, well, they may not have had it, but from what Narinda said, they did have it. It's just they didn't bring it. And I think it comes back to change. It changes the personnel and bad communications, I think.
I think one of the things there is that for the previous exec member, it was memory and of an experience of the post. It was having all that on tap in the memory of process that they've been and things that they've been doing in the past, that they could bring that instant answers and instant response to make sure that things are coming forward. For a new member to come in and take over that role, they can't acquire that knowledge straight off, but it should be at hand.
I don't think that's the case at all. And we didn't get the answers the last 2 meetings either. The issue was that we were really clear about what we wanted, and I don't think David understood that we'd been very clear about what we'd wanted, so we didn't get it again. I think that's what's happened.
I think the issue was, the main comment was, we want the measurement, and that came from lots of people in the room. And so we expected to see the measurement, especially because Councillor Carr had said there would be smart objectives in it, and Councillor Head didn't need to be involved in it. It was for Narinda to go away, find it out, and that's why it was so astonishing that there was nothing in here. And I don't know why it would be secret. So it's just maybe making clear that they know what's asked, and say, yeah, I can bring it back. But if there's a reason they can't bring it back, it's communicated to the committee.
Inability or lack of rather than it being something that's been overlooked or not done. Like you say, I don't think it was being kept secret. I just think it just wasn't brought forward. And it's, the comments from Narinda are that it's available. She could bring it tomorrow, but then we're not around to bring it to a committee to go and look at. So it's got to come to a committee for us to discuss. And there are those 2 dates that fit. I don't think for what we called forward in February, whether we want to take on that topic again, because even if it was only half the time, it still adds a lot of workload onto February's one, considering we've got one the next week. So March 4th would be an interim, I think, for that point.
Sorry, maybe the answer is to make sure that when somebody's asked to come back, that we clearly give them the minutes and the actions from the thing that they're meant to be coming back with, so that they don't, for whatever reason, not look at them.
Rather than just an appointment in the diary saying you've got a meeting to come attend to, and this is the topic, to set the expectations as these were requests. Yeah, no, I quite agree with that. That forearmed is forewarned, and for want of a better phrase. Yeah, so we'll take that on board as an action for the future.
I'm just thinking, I'm not quite sure if we were clear to Narinda on the information we wanted tonight, which is the measurements from the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, because now on reflection, I'm thinking maybe she's going to send everything that's to do with the domestic abuse strategy or the community partnership strategy and all the actions there, which overlap with this, and they did say. So I think it's just being clear to her what it is that we want exactly.
Yeah, I'll take that up with Neil to make sure we've got that document that's straightforward, and we'll convey that either with a call or with an email. So, but I'd prefer it to be a call rather than an email and just something sitting in somebody's inbox and say, I'll deal with that on Monday. So we will. I'll do that for what's today? Forgotten what today is. Monday. Right,
Monday
I've got to pack my bags in 2 days as well. So.
If we could have a paper trail as well, that would be useful.
Yeah,
but I totally agree with you on a phone call.
Phone call with a paper trail to follow it up.
Sure,
we'll deal with that. So that was page 58, 59. Any comments? Waste transport, local transport plan. We have noted, it's completely outstanding. Page 60. Move on to page 60, 2nd of October meeting. And this one, that one, 24, page 61. Page 62, which we've just discussed about and we'll find a willing volunteer. Blanket email with an offer of free McDonald's, I see. And the last bit on 63. Yeah, by the side of the bin that works. So if that's us finished with the action tracker, is there unless there are any comments, we bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.